NDC. We are committed to reducing emissions of all greenhouse gases by between 59 and 67%, covering all sectors of the economy. Our goal of ending deforestation by 2030 will continue to help make this objective a reality. By hosting COP in the Amazon, Brazil wants to show that it is impossible to preserve nature without caring for people. There is no way to revolutionize our relationship with the planet without engaging a wide range of stakeholders. This is why we promoted the global ethical stocktake with 6 regional dialogues that included representatives from civil society, the private sector, indigenous peoples and traditional communities, scientists, artists, religious leaders, and local authorities. The voice of the people must reach heads of state and government. We want to promote a leaders' summit that fosters a frank and direct dialogue worthy of the mission entrusted to us by our societies. We have the chance to right injustices and build a prosperous and sustainable future for everyone. Thus, I call on the countries that have not yet submitted their NDCs. The success of COP30 in Belém depends on you. Let us make the Amazon the stage for a decisive moment in the history of multilateralism. I have said and have been saying that COP30, Mr. Secretary General, is the COP of truth. This COP is going to have to say whether or not we believe what science is showing us. If we, leaders, heads of states, if we trust or don't trust science, because we're going to have to make a decision. Because if we do not make a decision, society is going to stop believing its leaders. And instead of strengthening the struggle against global warming, we are going to help discredit multilateralism, policies, and in democracy. And all of us will lose because denialism may actually win. Thus, the ball is in COP30's court, and I hope to rely on all of you and see all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now let me open the floor to heads of state and government. And Excellencies, in the interest of time and ensuring that all participants get to speak, I encourage you to keep your interventions to a maximum of 3 minutes. Leaders will speak from one of the lecterns at the front of the room. You'll be escorted from your seats to the lectern by UN protocol. To begin, I am delighted to introduce His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China.
Your Excellency Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Your Excellency President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, colleagues, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, a pivotal year for countries to submit their new nationally determined contributions. Global climate governance is entering a key stage. I wish to share with you 3 points. First, we must firm up confidence. Green and low-carbon transition is the trend of our time. While some country is acting against it, the international community should stay focused on the right direction, remain unwavering in confidence, unremitting in actions, and unrelenting in intensity, and push for formulation and delivery on NDCs, with a view to providing more positive energy to the cooperation on global climate governance. Second, we must live up to responsibilities. In the course of global green transition, fairness and equity should be upheld, and the right to development of developing countries fully respected. The transition should serve to narrow rather than widen the North-South gap. Countries need to honor the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, whereby developed countries should take the lead in fulfilling emission reduction obligations and provide more financial and technological support to developing countries. Third, we must deepen cooperation. The world now faces a huge demand for green development. It is important that countries strengthen international coordination in green technologies and industries to address the shortfall in green production capacity and ensure free flow of quality green products globally, so that the benefits of green development can reach all corners of the world. Colleagues, let me take this opportunity to announce China's new NDCs as follows. China will, by 2035, reduce economy-wide net greenhouse gas emissions by 7% to 10% from peak levels, striving to do better. Increase the share of non-fossil fuels in total energy consumption to over 30%. Expand the installed capacity of wind and solar power to over 6 times the 2020 levels, striving to bring the total to 3,600 gigawatts. Scale up the total forest stock volume to over 24 billion cubic meters. Make new energy vehicles the mainstream in the sales of new vehicles. Expand the national carbon emissions trading market to cover major high-emission sectors, and basically establish a climate-adaptive society. These targets represent China's best efforts based on the requirements of the Paris Agreement. Meeting these targets requires both painstaking efforts by China itself and a supportive and open international environment. We have the resolve and confidence to deliver on our commitments. Colleagues, great visions require concrete actions. Climate response is an urgent yet long-term task. Let's all step up our actions to realize the beautiful vision of harmony between man and nature and preserve planet Earth, the place we call home. Thank you.
I thank the President of China for his statement and now welcome Her Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, to come to the podium.
President Lula, Secretary General Guterres, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, 10 years have passed since we adopted the Paris Agreement, and since then the world has changed. Let me give you just 3 figures. Since Paris, renewable energy has increased by 140%. Investment in clean energy has increased by almost 80%. And carbon pricing in countries has doubled from 40 to 80. So the clean transition is moving on. And let me assure you, Europe will stay the course on our climate ambition. Our emissions are down nearly 40% since 1990. They now represent only 6% of global emissions. We are on track to reach our 2030 target, that is to cut emissions by minus 55%. And I'm happy to announce that last week, Member States agreed that our national determined contribution would range between 66% and 72%. So, work is advancing, and we will formally submit our NDC ahead of COP30. But in parallel, we are also looking ahead. We're working on a 2040 target of a proposed 90% emission reduction. That is our way to climate neutrality by 2050. And my message is that the world can count on European Union's continued climate leadership. My second point, we're doubling down on global partnerships. Because the question is no longer if the transition will occur and how fast, but who will benefit. Europe's answer is clear. All countries worldwide should reap the benefits, especially the most vulnerable. And that is why we will remain the world's largest providers of climate finance. In addition, we will mobilize up to 300 billion euros to support the clean transition worldwide through our Global Gateway investment program. And we will turn our collective agreement to triple renewable energy by 2030 into a reality. We support, for example, over 300 million people in Africa to give them access to electricity and clean cooking. And this is not only a climate issue, this is about basic human dignity, because no mother, no child should die because simply cooking dinner under abhorrent circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, President Luna will soon welcome us to the Amazon, the green lungs of our planet. There could be no better place to reaffirm our strong commitment to multilateralism. So let's get it done. Thank you very much.
I thank the President of the European Commission and welcome now His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey.
Değerli devlet ve
Distinguished heads of state and government, Mr. Secretary General, I greet you all with most heartfelt feelings. I wish Brazil success as it prepares to host the 30th Climate Conference in November. The climate law, which we adopted last July, was a significant step for us towards reaching our 2053 net zero emissions target. Our endeavors to establish an emissions trading system, implement a green finance strategy, and to create a national green taxonomy are all ongoing. We have built our climate policy on 7 pillars: energy, industry, buildings, transportation, waste, agriculture, and forestry. We have also formulated our second nationally determined contribution to cover all sectors and all greenhouse gases. Through the policies to be implemented in the economy, we aim to achieve an emission reduction of 466 million tons by 2035 and to lower our emissions down to 643 million tons. While increasing the share of renewable energy and improving energy efficiency, we are expanding low-carbon technologies in industry. As of this year, we have raised the share of renewable energy within the total installed capacity up to more than 60%. 2053, we are rapidly reinforcing our infrastructure, particularly electric vehicle production, and we are prioritizing railway investments. In line with our 2053 net zero emissions target, we will continue to transform our key sectors. Now, access to international financing and cooperation in the field of technology, both of these are essential to be able to achieve these goals. I would like to underline particularly that our water efficiency campaign and the Zero Waste Initiative, led under the auspices of my spouse Emine Erdoğan and elevated to the global level, both of these play a critical role in our fight against climate change. And we hope to crown all these efforts by hosting the 31st COP, Conference of the Parties, in 2026. So with these thoughts in mind, I wish this climate summit to yield beneficial results, and I once again extend my greetings to you all with kind regards.
I thank the President of the Republic of Turkey and now ask His Excellency Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, to come to the podium.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary General, colleagues. This is the decisive decade for acting on the environmental challenge of climate change, but also seizing the economic opportunities of clean energy. We all grasp the scale and the urgency of our task. We all understand the consequences of inaction for our environment, for our economies, for our people's way of life, and for our children's future. Australians know the toll taken by extreme weather events becoming more frequent and more intense. The devastation that cyclones, floods, bushfires and drought inflict on our communities. And Australia knows that we are not alone. We are all involved. An essential message that each of us can send to our citizens is this: it is not too late. If we act now and move with common purpose, then we can do more than just guard against the very worst. We can protect our environment and build a stronger and fairer economy for the next generation. That is the optimism and determination that Australia brings to this task. And today I present Australia's next nationally determined contribution. Australia's 2035 target is to reduce emissions by 62 to 70% on 2005 levels. This target is ambitious, but importantly, it is also achievable. It is backed by the independent scientific advice of our Climate Change Authority. It will mean that over the next decade, we halve our current level of emissions. And it will ensure that Australia honours our commitment to the Paris Agreement and its goal of keeping global temperatures below dangerous levels. Setting targets and showing ambition matters. It provides accountability for government and certainty for private sector investment. What is most important is having the practical plan to reach our goal, and that is where Australian clean energy is the key. Just as our traditional resources have helped to power the extraordinary economic transformation of our region, our renewables can underpin new prosperity for the growing economies of the Indo-Pacific. And our Pacific family is partnering with Australia in our bid to host COP31 in next year. We want to bring the world with us on climate change, not by asking any nation to forego the jobs or security that its people deserve, but by working with every nation to seize and share those opportunities. None of us can succeed alone, but together we cannot fail. I thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister of Australia and now ask His Excellency Surangel S. Whips Jr., President of the Republic of Palau, to come to the floor.
President Lula, Secretary General, Excellencies, colleagues, distinguished guests. It is my distinct honor to speak to you on behalf of the 39 members of the Alliance of Small Island States, whose people are the most vulnerable, living daily with the stark reality of climate change. Rising seas, stronger storms, and changing ecosystems are not projections for us. They are our lived experience, and they threaten our very survival. This summit is a key milestone on the road to COP30, a COP at which the outcome must be nothing less than transformational. It must deliver new commitments that keep us firmly on the pathway to limit warming to 1.5. The science is unequivocal. This is a critical decade. Delay is defeat. Every fraction of a degree beyond 1.5 brings irreversible loss, especially for the vulnerable people of small islands. We come here with firm expectations that new climate commitments in the form of 1.5 aligned nationally determined contributions would be submitted in time to be included in the synthesis report ahead of COP30. And I must speak plainly to major emitters. Your leadership will define the outcome. Those with the greatest responsibility and the greatest capacity to act must do far more. Align your economies with 1.5, phase out fossil fuels, and accelerate the transition to clean energy, and ensure that your actions inspire confidence, not doubt, in the multilateral process. The recent opinion from the ICJ has reaffirmed that what IOSIS has long said: climate action is not optional. It is an obligation grounded in international law and in the principles of equity and justice. The world must look to this opinion as a moral and legal compass, underscoring that failure to act is failure to meet international duty. Excellencies, the measure of leadership at this summit and at COP30 is whether we choose short-term convenience for some or long-term survival for all peoples. For small island developing states, there is no margin for delay. We urge all countries, especially those major emitters, to deliver an outcome at COP30 that is ambitious, just, and firmly aligned with 1.5, this decade and not the next. We urge you to lead by example as we face these interconnected challenges together. Let us turn these challenges into opportunities, and we know it is technically and financially possible, but time is running short to act. Small island developing states are leading the way in climate ambition, and I am proud to highlight the leadership of my country. Palau today holds a rare net negative status. Our forests absorb more than 6 times the greenhouse gases we emit. But we are not stopping there. By 2035, we are committing to slash emissions by 44% compared to 2015 levels. We've broadened our targets across more sectors, such as oceans, but we cannot do it on our own. We need stronger support for implementation, and we are also not alone. Other SIDS are stepping up with bold commitments too, and Palau is committed to submitting our NDC 3.0 ahead of COP30. For SIDS, ambition alone is not enough. Implementation demands resources and fairness. and we call for scaled-up, predictable climate finance to support both mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. The pledges of the past must now be met with delivery. This includes new and additional finance, not repackaged promises. Further adaptation to climate impacts is fundamentally important to SIDS, and we'll be looking to COP30 to finally deliver an operational global goal on adaptation that includes the resources necessary to turn plans into action. The world is watching, our people are waiting, and our survival depends on what we decide together now. The future we shape must be one which guarantees dignity, justice, and opportunity for all. I thank you.
I thank the Chair of AOSIS and President of the Republic of Palau. And our next speaker is His Excellency Mohammed Shehbaz Sharif, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. President Lula da Silva, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. As I speak to you, my country is reeling from intense monsoon rains, cloudburst, flash floods, mudslides, and devastating urban flooding. This climate-induced catastrophe has impacted over 5 million lives across 4,100 villages. Over 1,000 precious lives have been lost. We are facing this calamity at a time when the scars of the 2022 floods that inflicted losses exceeding $30 billion and displaced millions are still visible across our land, and Secretary Guterres is a witness to this catastrophe. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions is almost negligible, but we bear impacts far beyond our share. Our commitment to delivering on our climate agenda, however, remains steadfast and unwavering. In our 2021 nationally determined contribution, Pakistan committed to an unconditional 15% reduction in projected greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 as part of an overall target of cutting emissions by 50%. I'm pleased to share that Pakistan has already delivered on its unconditional pledge of a 15% reduction. Renewables are presently providing over 32% of Pakistan's power mix. Solar energy has grown sevenfold since 2021. 23,000 hectares of mangroves have been restored. However, the implementation of Pakistan's national adaptation plan is hampered severely due to inadequate international climate finance. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to announce here that we shall increase the share of renewables and hydropower to 62% of our energy mix by 2035, expanding nuclear energy capacity by 1,200 megawatt by 2030, shifting 30% of transport to cleaner mobility by 2030, and establishing 3,000 charging stations nationwide, scaling up climate-smart agriculture, safeguarding water security, and advancing the plantation of 1 billion trees. Excellencies, in conclusion, may I say, while Pakistan is willing and determined to be part of the solution to the climate crisis, we hope and expect that the international community will also honor its commitment for the sake of our future generations. And my last line is that loans over loans, adding to loans, is not the solution. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
I thank the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and the Secretary General has to leave now, and I believe also for a meeting with the Security Council. I believe, President Lula, you also need to depart, or you could stay for a little while. Okay. Our next speaker is Her Excellency Maya Amor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. President Lula, Madam Deputy Secretary General, my sister, distinguished guests, distinguished colleagues all. We gather here today not simply to speak about climate ambition, but to demand climate action of ourselves and of each other. Barbados's NDC sits within a framework of our investment plan for prosperity and resilience. We've estimated that this plan will cost us about $11.6 billion between now and the next decade, and that of that, $5 billion is likely to be public sector driven. We recognize that if this is to be real, we have to take the world as we find it, and we have to understand how we're going to finance it, and we have to understand how we are going to have access to the goods that are necessary, even if we find the finance, because very often small states cannot have control over the supply chain and fall down in its ability to execute. At the same time, when we ask of others, we do not absent ourselves from the obligation of performance. And what do I mean by that? The Bridgetown Initiative speaks not just of asking for concessional funding from the world, but also of greater domestic resource mobilization. We have determined that every citizen must share the burden in order to share the bounty of a clean and proper and fit environment. We ask our citizens as employees to be able, and as self-employed, to contribute 0.25% of all their wages and earnings. And we as government go the extra mile, and we will contribute 0.35% of GDP every year into a resilience and regeneration fund. We continue to try to innovate, because in the world where we are not winning the battle of longer capital and cheaper capital, we need, therefore, to innovate. And whether it is debt swaps, or whether it is natural disaster clauses, which the market has just shown it will accept, when we issued $500 million bond 2 months ago, we need to be able to use all of these instruments to ensure that the NDCs don't just become an archival document, but a lived reality for our people. At the same time, we need to recognize that if we are going to reduce emissions, and I say this to you, President Lula, as we go into COP, we had a voluntary agreement on methane out of Dubai. That is not enough. We need a legally binding global agreement for methane reduction. The fossil fuel industry is not the enemy. It is the emissions. And if we have a legally binding methane agreement, we can buy ourselves time over the next 15 years or 20 years to give them sufficient time to continue to do super fast research to scale up decarbonizing technology to commercial level, while at the same time giving countries in the South the opportunity not to have to abandon the one thing that can finance their way to net zero. This makes sense for the oil and gas people. It makes sense for the planet. It makes sense for the farmers. It makes sense for the planet. And quite frankly, we cannot continue as if things are still the same. If we want the NDCs to be appropriately applied, we have to find a way to buy time. This allows everybody to stay in the game, and it allows those who believe and those who don't believe to work in common purpose. So I look forward to our being able not just to execute our NDCs in terms of ambition, but also for us to have an additional discussion urgently. I feel that we do not need to reinvent the wheel. The Montreal Protocol that allowed us to reduce HFCs is the most successful climate agreement in history. We can replicate it with no more than a 2- or 3-page agreement on the reduction of methane as a matter of legally binding obligations. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister of Barbados for her statement and invite as our next speaker His Excellency Gabriel Boric, President of the Republic of Chile.
Thank you very much. Muy buenos días a todos.
Good afternoon to all of those present here. All protocols observed. With respect to this meeting, all of the countries who are part of this institution must make our NDCs at the national level, the NDCs, and we must tackle with determination the challenges of global climate financing. And this takes place in a turbulent world where, unfortunately, we hear strong voices that minimize or even deny the reality of climate change, of the climate crisis. And in the light of these voices, we have to respond with firmness. There's no more time to lose. Surely the rich countries are not going to pay for the consequences. Or like poor countries or developing countries with respect to the consequences of climate change. This denialism is particularly dangerous. We can discuss without any doubt and in a legitimate discussion, how can we tackle, what are the best strategies? What do we have to do to tackle the climate crisis? What countries have more or less responsibilities? What are the timelines involved? But we cannot discuss or we cannot question that there is a climate crisis. And this is a lie if we do that. And lying is not good. We shouldn't relativize this. It's not an opinion. We have to face the lies. And those who with power affirm that there is no climate crisis, they are passing those costs on to the poor countries. And in the light of this, all of the members of the United Nations, we should stand up and reveal ourselves. The transition that we need, we know, cannot wait. It has to be sped up, but it has to be fair as well. The richer countries have to take the first step and have to assume the responsibility that falls upon them as being the main emitter of carbon throughout history, being committed to the world to reduce their emissions more rapidly and support the transition in developing countries, the same ones that today are the most vulnerable in the light of climate change. And allow me to tell you something with a great deal of affection, because we have a great deal of respect and a very rich relationship with the members of the European Union. Accepting, as most countries have done, accepting the increase and raising defense expenditure to 5%, that is unacceptable. They are forcing them to raise their defense expenditure, and the defense expenditure is one of the most polluting factors. And of course, we welcome the fact when they say we're going to reduce our emissions by 70%. But at the same time, on the other hand, they are increasing their investments in war. And investing in war is not a very good investment. We must invest more in peace and in how we can improve conditions for developing countries, for this would be a fair and a just climate change. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we know what is at stake, and that is why we support decisively President Lula and the organization of the summit. In Colombia, we are updating our NDCs. In Chile, rather, we are increasing our NDCs. We have set the timeline by 2035 as a step towards carbon neutrality, and this will happen in 2070. And I hope we'll do it before. Chile, furthermore, has had a strategy which has pointed to different sectors of the economy, from mining to transportation. Santiago de Chile, our capital, is the capital of the world outside of China that has more electric. And we are looking at these. We have areas that were polluted for a long time, and now we are improving that. Thanks to all of those who are committed to this. Today, we are the ones, the decision makers, who can change the course of the world, not for us, but for the upcoming generations. And we have a responsibility, and history will judge us for this. Thank you.
I thank the President of the Republic of Chile and now welcome as our next speaker His Excellency Taye Akeselasi Amde, President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia.
Excellencies, heads of state and governments, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank His Excellency President Lula da Silva and Madam Deputy Secretary General for convening this meeting as we look forward for a much anticipated COP30 in Belém, Brazil. Ethiopia, together with other African Union and African countries, had the honor of hosting the second climate summit early this month. The summit, involving nearly 25,000 participants from all over the stakeholders, was a successful event that sets out Africa climate priorities. The outcome declaration encompasses a commitment that Africa is not merely a victim of climate change, but a proactive force in developing innovative and sustainable solutions. I thank the organizers for this opportunity to share the main outcomes of the African Climate Summit as reflected in the Addis Ababa Declaration. It is our hope and expectation that these main deliverables will be taken up and mainstreamed into the outcomes of the Belém Declaration. Excellencies, Africa's priorities are clear: to accelerate progress toward the Paris Agreement targets and within the framework of the common but differentiated responsibility, the continent is determined to take bold steps. Among them is the establishment of an African Climate Facility and an African Climate Innovation Compact, which are designed to mobilize $50 billion annually in a Catholic finance. This effort will help champion homegrown solutions, accelerate innovations, and scale climate action across communities. Equally important is our ambition to position Africa as a global hub for low-carbon manufacturing and green intra-African trade by advancing along a green-first pathway to economic growth. At the same time, the continent is committed to scaling up investment in renewable energy with a collective goal of reaching 300 gigawatts of installed capacity by 2030. This ambition is not only about reducing emissions, it is about creating jobs, ensuring universal energy access, and laying the foundation for a more resilient and inclusive economy. Africa also resolved to manage its mineral resources responsibly, particularly in critical minerals that are indispensable for sustainable growth and a just energy transition. The implementation of the African Green Mineral Strategy will be central to this. Furthermore, combating desertification and advancing land restoration remain high priorities. Programs such as the Great Green Wall, the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative, Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative, and the Central Africa Forest Initiative provide concrete pathways for restoring degraded ecosystem and securing livelihoods. I would like to mention that we have spent close to $20 billion for the Ethiopian Green Legacy Initiative. This is indeed a bold measure, an initiative that didn't wait other financiers and contributors. Excellencies, food security also remains a pressing priority. The Addis Ababa Declaration called for tangible contribution in this area and for the implementation of the Secretary General's appeal from the Addis Ababa UN Food System Stocktake Summit. Effective global solidarity is essential if we are to build a food secure and climate resilient future supported by the necessary financial resource and technological innovation. In this regard, I commend Brazil for the innovative measures it is pursuing through the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty launched under its G20 presidencies. Excellencies, finally, Africa extends an invitation to our friends. Walk with us. But our journey forward will neither be dictated by the timid nor constrained by the doubtful. The destiny of Africa rests in the hands of Africa, and our commitment is now. In Belém, Brazil will play our rightful role to bridge differences and foster new commitments and actionable targets. In this regard, we stand with our Brazilian brothers and sisters to the successful hosting of the COP30, and I thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the President of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and our next speaker is His Excellency Luong Kuong, State President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam.
Thưa Ngài Tổng thống Brazil, thưa bà Phó Tổng Thư ký Liên Hợp Quốc, thưa các quý vị, tôi cảm ơn Ngài Tổng Thư ký Liên Hợp Quốc đã tổ chức hội nghị cấp cao về hành động khí hậu đặc biệt quan trọng này, thể hiện quyết tâm mạnh mẽ của Liên Hợp Quốc.
Distinguished delegates, I thank the Secretary General for convening the special high event on climate action, a most important event that demonstrates the strong resolve of the United Nations and the international community to join hands in addressing climate change. Vietnam is among the developing countries most severely affected by climate change. We are very clearly aware of and remain steadfast in our pursuit of sustainable development goals, striving for a harmonious balance between economic growth, environmental protection, and climate change response. Vietnam has continuously improved its related institutions and policies and established a coherent legal framework that enables green and just transition, climate change adaptation, and strong and resolute actions to achieve committed goals alongside the international community. At the same time, Vietnam will also continue to enhance adaptive capacity and resilience in vulnerable areas and communities in regions affected by climate change so that no one is left behind. On this occasion, allow me to propose 3 key points. First, all countries in the international community need to ensure the full and timely delivery of climate finance commitments, with particular attention to resources for a just transition. This process should be aligned with social security, job creation, and support for vulnerable workers and communities. Second, we need to accelerate in more vigorous and substantive manner the transfer of advanced, clean, and efficient technologies to support the development of a green and circular economy, which will help developing countries to bridge the development gaps. Third, the United Nations must continue to play its central role in fostering solidarity, cooperation, trust building, and ensuring equity and justice, and in realizing the objectives of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. Developed nations should take the lead in fulfilling their strong commitments to emissions reduction, finance, and technology contributions. They should also initiate and spread new initiatives and solutions, foster dialogues, and connect nations, businesses, social organizations, and citizens worldwide to collectively take actions. Thank you.
Of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. Our next speaker is Her Excellency Hilda Heine, President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands.
Thank you. President Lula, Deputy Secretary General, fellow leaders, distinguished participants, I bring warm greetings of Yahweh from the Marshall Islands. I also bring a demand for us all to wake up. From communities whose hospitals and schools are being destroyed by king tides brought on by sea level rise, whose crops are being devastated by rising temperatures and the salination of our soil, by communities facing the prospect of migration from their homelands. I ask you to wake up. As the Ambition Coalition said this morning, we cannot silence the science. The NDCs delivered so far do not keep 1.5 in reach. As the ICJ decided, 1.5 is legally binding. It is the only threshold under which countries like mine can keep our people safe and preserve our human rights. In my first week in office this term, my government was forced to declare national emergencies due to devastating flooding and droughts. If we fail to wake up now and end our dependence on fossil fuels, the leaders of every country in this room will be woken up by calls about catastrophes, of wildfires, of storms, of heat waves, of starvation and drought, and the lives of our citizens lost as a result. The Marshall Islands is doing its part. We submitted our third nationally determined contribution in February. We committed to emissions reductions by at least 58% by 2035, compared to 2010 levels. Our NDC covers emissions across the country's economy and sets out a path for transitioning away from fossil fuels. In transport, we've drawn on our strong cultural heritage of navigation to begin transforming our inter-island transport to a low-carbon future. We're strengthening traditional canoe-building skills for transport inside our atoll lagoons, training young people in how to build these zero-carbon vessels. For longer inter-island transport needs, we've launched a state-of-the-art cargo hybrid sailing ship, the Juranai, which uses wind and solar energy to reduce emissions by 80%. Our NDC sets out not only how the country will rapidly cut its emissions, but also steps it will take to adapt and build resilience and respond to loss and damage as a result of the climate crisis. But plans on paper mean nothing without the finance to deliver it. We desperately need dedicated finance for adaptation and loss and damage. Fellow leaders, and especially those of you from the G20, if the Marshall Islands can deliver an ambitious NDC, so can you. In fact, as the ICJ decisions confirm, you are legally required to. You must deliver stronger NDCs that can meet 1.5 and say how you will transition away from fossil fuels. The opportunities for our economies and our people and planet's health far outweigh the short-term costs. A decade ago in Paris, the international community came together and offered the world hope. This year, against the odds, we must do so again. I thank you.
I thank the President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands. Our next speaker is His Excellency Feleti Teo, Prime Minister of Tuvalu.
Thank you, Madam President. With all protocols duly observed, I thank the Secretary General for convening this important event at a time when the world needs courage clarity and conviction. And it is indeed my greatest honor to share that Tuvalu has in the last couple of days announced its nationally determined contribution, NDC 3.0. This is our strongest pledge yet to the Paris Agreement and to securing a livable future for Tuvalu and for all humankind. As we mark 10 years since the Paris Agreement, this is a defining moment for boldness. Through Tuvalu's NDC 3.0, we raise our ambition to the highest level, showing that even the smallest nation can lead because of our survival, and that of the planet is on the line. Tuvalu therefore commits to, 1, achieving a 100% reduction of emissions from the electricity sector, moving to near zero power generation by 2030. 2, cutting total emission from the energy sector by 80% below the 2014 levels by 2035. And 3, following a zero carbon development pathway by 2050. These will be achieved in a manner that is just and fair and respecting the rights and dignity of every Tuvaluan. Excellencies, Tuvalu's NDC 3.0 is ambitious because our survival demands nothing less, but we cannot act alone. Tuvalu therefore call on major emitters to, 1, step up methane action with binding commitment, 2, transition away from fossil fuel, 3, honor climate finance promises for a just transition, and 4, deliver new NDCs aligned with the 1.5 target ahead of the COP30 in Belém, to be accompanied by robust implementation strategy. The ICJ advisory opinion on climate change has made it crystal clear that inaction is not just immoral, it is unlawful. Together, we must rise to the challenge of honoring both legal and moral responsibility in safeguarding our shared future and pulling the emergency brake on methanes. Cutting methane is the fastest scalable way to slow global warming, avoiding up to 0.3 degrees centigrade of warming by 2040, and buying critical time for long-term CO2 decarbonization strategies to take effect. The path ahead will not be without challenges, yet with political will and strengthened international cooperation, we can meet them. Let us commit not only to setting ambitious targets, but to taking concrete action that ensure a safe and sustainable future for all. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the Prime Minister of Tuvalu. Our next speaker is His Excellency Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Excellencies, I wish to extend Jamaica's support for the work of the COP presidency of Brazil and the UNFCCC ahead of COP30. Climate change is an existential threat to both the livelihoods and environments of communities worldwide, but disproportionately so to SIDS and LDCs. Sobering reports and assessments globally of the current state of the climate have increased the necessity for enhanced adaptation and mitigation measures to confront the challenges and bolster resilience. In Jamaica, the nation is contending with intensifying adverse effects of climate change. Droughts, floods, tropical storms, and hurricanes have already impeded Jamaica's development. 90% of our GDP is generated in close proximity to coastal regions. Robust adaptation measures are not merely preferable, but are imperative. Over the past decade, Jamaica has made steady progress in climate action, yet, as we know, global climate ambition remains below what is required, and countries like ours must lead with both credibility and innovation. Jamaica's journey with our nationally determined contributions reflect this leadership. Our first NDC focused primarily on the energy sector, targeting up to a 10% reduction in emissions. By 2020, Jamaica became the first Caribbean nation and the 11th globally to submit an updated NDC, increasing our ambition with targets of 25.4% unconditionally and 28% conditionally by 2030. We have also broadened our scope to include forestry and land use change, further strengthening our climate leadership. I am proud to announce that Jamaica submitted its further updated NDC 3.0, which is both comprehensive and realistic and further aligns our ambitions with action. Jamaica's targets are anchored in existing policies and supported by political will. Key highlights of our NDC include a broader push for renewable electricity, energy efficiency in the water sector, and electric vehicle adoption, targeting 12% of private fleets and 16% of public fleets by 2030. Decarbonization in the cement industry by 40 kilotons of CO2, and zero net loss of forests, along with mangroves and seagrass restoration. Excellencies, by 2035, Jamaica aims for emission reductions between 26% and 41.7% compared to 2012 levels, depending on the scale of international support received. Jamaica is producing an implementation plan for NDC 3.0 that will provide a clear roadmap with sector-specific targets, stakeholder responsibilities, and costing to guide investment and partnership. This is not just a pledge. It is a practical, economy-wide strategy for a low-emission, climate-resilient future. In closing, Jamaica reaffirms its commitment as a party to the UNFCCC on climate change and the Paris Agreement. Jamaica remains dedicated to delivering on NDCs with increased ambitions for emissions reduction in mind, while also pursuing just transition, green growth, and a climate-resilient future for all. Jamaica welcomes the support of the international community as it pursues these ambitious goals. I thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and our next speaker is His Excellency Sadir Zapata.
Dear heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen, Kyrgyzstan makes effort to fulfill its obligations within the global climate agenda. We reaffirm our commitment to the goals of the Paris Agreement as a low-emissions country. Last week, we adopted the third nationally determined contributions to fulfill the country's climate change commitments. This document integrates measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adaptation, including efficient water use, strengthening energy security, developing green transport, and sustainable agricultural development. By 2050, we aim to reduce emissions, according to the International Atmospheric Profile, by 16%. Our country plans to achieve carbon neutrality, and to achieve this goal, we intend to implement renewable energy projects, including the construction of hydropower electric power plants. For example, A project to build one of the largest hydropower plants in the region, the Khambarata 1 hydroelectric power station, has been launched jointly with neighboring countries. At the same time, Kyrgyzstan is proposing to restructure its foreign debt by exchanging it for the funds of specific green projects. This includes financial projects in the area of ecology and sustainable development to regions, mountainous regions, through the Climate Trust Fund. We invite investors to participate in our green projects. Dear participants, as a mountain country, Kyrgyzstan regards the preservation of mountain systems as a shared responsibility of all countries. After all, mountains provide humanity with ecosystem services essential to life, such as food, biodiversity, and energy. And rivers originating in the mountains provide livelihoods for approximately 2 billion people. At the same time, mountain ecosystems, including glaciers, and increasingly experiencing serious negative impact from the climate change. I would like to emphasize that Kyrgyzstan is firmly committed to broad international partnerships to address mountain and climate-related challenges. We call on countries to join the Declaration on Climate, Mountains and Glaciers and become members of the Mountain Negotiation Group under the Convention on Climate Change. We believe the special needs of mountain countries should be fully taken into account in the new global climate finance framework to be adopted at COP30 in Belize. We strongly support continued dialogue on mountain and climate issues within the United Nations. We firmly believe that collective action is essential to prevent global warming, safeguard mountain ecosystem, and ensure the enduring future of humanity. Thank you very much for it.
I thank the President of the Kyrgyz Republic, and I would now like to welcome to the podium His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, the political landscape has become more polarized and more uncertain. Yet the urgency of climate action has never been greater. This crisis, ladies and gentlemen, is accelerating with devastating consequences across sectors. It drives instability, weakens economies, and forces many countries to divert very scarce resources from health, education, and social protection into emergency responses. At COP30 Brazil, we must set the highest possible ambition for NDCs firmly aligned with a 1.5 degrees pathway. That was the spirit of the Second Africa Climate Summit, where Africa asserted its agency, spoke with one voice, and demanded that global commitments be honored. Kenya has already acted. Early this year, we submitted our NDC 3.0, bold, economy-wide, and grounded in a whole-of-society approach. Our targets are ambitious, but also hopeful. We offer global solutions for emission reductions at scale if adequate financing is provided. At the same time, endless debate continues over fossil fuel reserves, while our immense endowments in sunlight, wind, and geothermal lies underutilized. This, even as millions still lack electricity and clean cooking solutions. Economic growth, ladies and gentlemen, and climate action are inseparable. Ignore the climate, the development will unravel. Confront the crisis, and new pathways for green, inclusive growth open. That is why new, predictable, and innovative financing must be unlocked. At COP28 in Dubai, building on the Africa Declaration, Nairobi Declaration, we launched the Global Solidarities Levies Task Force, a first breakthrough came this June when 8 countries, including Kenya, formed a coalition to introduce solidarity levies on premium class flyers. These initiatives must inform the Baku to Belém roadmap to mobilize the 1.3 trillion that developing countries urgently need. Africa is already stepping up. At this year's Africa Climate Summit, 8 leading African financial institutions signed a cooperation framework to unlock US dollars 100 billion in investment capital. At the same time, when the world risks fragmentation and a retreat into transactional politics, Africa is leaning forward to shape its own destiny. We now invite the global community to join us, to stand with us in this noble undertaking. This is the moment to be bolder, to show genuine climate solidarity, and to silence the naysayers. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the President of the Republic of Kenya. Our next speaker is Her Excellency Dina Ercilia Boluarte Zagara, President of the Republic of Peru.
Gracias y muy buenas tardes.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Peru is one of the countries with the greatest degree of biodiversity in the world, thanks to the 39 ecosystems that we have identified throughout our territory. More than 60% of our territory is covered by the Amazon, and we have 68% of tropical glaciers in the world. However, in the last 58 years, climate change has led to the loss of 56% of our total area, affecting the cycle of water in the Amazon. And our ocean as well is suffering from warming and acidification, and this has an impact on the livelihoods of our population. Even though less than 0.5% of global emissions come from Peru, we are highly vulnerable to climate change, and that is why we are calling for a comprehensive climate action which includes effective adaptation, accelerated mitigation, as well as sustainable development. And at this crucial moment for the world, Peru reaffirms its commitment to the Paris Agreement through the updating of our NDCs that we have called NDC 3.0, and it will be presented during COP30 in Belém in Brazil. Our NDC 3.0 will reflect a renewed ambition towards a resilient future, which will be low in carbon, and this will be done through a participatory process with indigenous peoples, local governments, regional governments, the private sector, and civil society, and mitigation by 2035. Here we commit to not go beyond the 179 tons of carbon dioxide. We have 76 measures aimed at decarbonization in 5 sectors: energy, transportation, agriculture, waste and forests. In adaptation, we prioritize territorial measures in 7 areas: water, forests, agriculture, health, fisheries, and aquaculture, tourism, and transportation. And we have incorporated migration and green jobs, totaling 84 measures, as well as a component on loss and damage. Peru is ready to take part in comprehensive approaches according to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, with a national registry of mitigation measures which facilitate investment in decarbonization. Peru is showing that climate action is possible only through political will, respect for multilateralism, and international cooperation. In this way, we can accelerate the solutions for climate change, taking care of our own home, our only home, Earth, Pachamama. Thank you.
I thank the President of the Republic of Peru. Our next speaker is His Majesty King Mswati III, Head of State of the Kingdom of Eswatini.
Madam Moderator, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to address this gathering as climate change threatens humanity and the planet. The Kingdom of Eswatini supports climate action despite our low greenhouse gas emissions. We are highly impacted by climate change, including droughts, floods, landslides, and strong winds, which contributes to the national development burden of adaptation. Despite this, Eswatini comes to this meeting determined to turn vulnerability into resilience. We are pleased to announce that we have concluded and submitted the Paris Agreement compliant NDC 3.0 to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The Kingdom is among the 10 African countries that met the September 22nd deadline, a significant milestone thanks to the support of the local UN office and partners. The NDC 3.0 revision process was comprehensive and inclusive with the greenhouse gas data local driven, providing that we own the process. Informing the process were lessons from NDC 2.0 and meaningful dialogues that produced a powerful, inclusive report. The report aligns with the 2023-28 National Development Plan, the first National Adaptation Plan, and the long-term low emissions development strategy. Eswatini will reform laws and strengthen all institutions to improve capacity, accountability, monitoring, and reporting. Financial constraint prevented NDC 2.0 from meeting its $900 million to $1.5 billion target. Eswatini has only raised about $449 million since 2018. The NDC 3.0, estimated to cost over $2.4 billion, requires scaled up and predictable climate change and predictable climate finance. Thus, we expect stronger collaboration with our partners, including the local private sector, to finance the $2 billion gap. Eswatini will remain a net carbon sink and reduce 2.24 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. We will also invest in climate-smart agriculture and technology. Early warning systems, water resource management, waste management, and infrastructure will be improved to protect our most vulnerable society. The just energy transition will promote affordable clean technologies and a low-carbon, climate-resilient economy. Our green finance instruments and incentives align financial flows with climate priorities and attract sustainable investment. To improve risk financing and reporting, we have created a Sendaya-aligned disaster risk management fund while continuing to promote renewable energy and digital tools. Technology and capacity building partnerships will accelerate the green and low carbon transition. It is important that finance must match talent and drive. Climate-smart technologies should be affordable for farmers, homeowners, and entrepreneurs after the loss and damage fund is recapitalized. We must all consider innovative internal and external resource mobilization strategies to unlock capital for adaptation and resilience. Otherwise, the Paris Agreement may break its promises. Finally, improving global financial architecture is essential for Eswatini's NDC 3.0 goals. Madam President, about survival and the opportunity, with the right support, Eswatini can turn climate challenges into green growth, food sovereignty, and shared prosperity. I thank you. May Almighty God bless us all.
I thank His Majesty King Mswati, Head of State of Kingdom of Eswatini. Our next speaker is His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic.
Merci beaucoup, mesdames.
Thank you very much, distinguished chairs, heads of state and government, ministers, ambassadors, all protocols observed. I will try to get to the brass tacks as quickly as possible, because here we all know full well why we're gathered here today. Almost 10 years ago, the Paris Agreement set our common objectives, underpinned by science, and I'll get to that later. Across all latitudes of our planet, we see that the consequences of climate change are self-evident, and this is all the more clearer today, 10 years on. France, since 2017, has been complying with its carbon budget, and we're living up to our obligations. We're going to continue doing that. You can count on our economy. You can count on our country. My second takeaway is that we must also rise to the occasion at the end of 2025. We know that there are going to be a number of objectives which we must meet at the COP30 in Belém, and that's very important. And I'd like to express our support to President Lula, all of the negotiators. You have our support. Let's keep it simple. Europeans will be there in Belém living up to expectations, and France will be defending that meeting. We'll be going down our 2050 carbon neutral climate path. We'll be submitting our nationally determined contribution, our NDCs, underpinned by science, bringing together private and public investment in accordance with the trajectory we've set. And on that note, France supports the establishment of interstate carbon credits, which will be a way of going further, as well as other mechanisms which will allow us to assist our industries as they undergo this transition, making them able to get there. That's what we'll be submitting before the end of the year, by November in Belém at the COP30. Aside from the NDCs, I wanted to talk about some of the key goals coming up in the next few months against this context. Progressive phase-out of fossil energies. This is something we decided on in Dubai. This is absolutely vital, and that's why we need to accelerate our efforts, moving away from carbon in particular. We need to think about previous COPs as we look ahead to the future. So we've established mechanisms to fund this transition, to address the issue of investments that were recently made, so that no one says it'll be a good idea to reopen up carbon-heavy industries. Instead of doing that, instead of backsliding, we need to accelerate the transition. This was said by a previous speaker. We need binding objectives on methane. We know that this is a reachable goal, and we participate. We are participating in the Global Methane Pledge, bringing together 150 countries. I encourage those who haven't yet done so to join our ranks. This is the best way to reduce our emissions, and it's also a G7 priority. We'll be chairing the G7 next year. My third takeaway I wanted to underscore is ecosystem restoration. We know, thanks to the work of the IPCC and IPBES, that there are deep synergies between our fight to limit CO2 emissions and the fight for biodiversity. They're mutually reinforcing. Therefore, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but that's why we need to forcefully fight to protect our oceans and our primary forests, because these two fights are part and parcel of our efforts to protect biodiversity. 3/4 of the world's biodiversity are located in those primeval forests. We have a lot of biodiversity, a wealth of biodiversity in our oceans. So if we protect those primeval forests and oceans, they're remarkable carbon sinks, in particular those contained in our primeval forests. So we're going to continue taking action on forests. The Belém meeting will be important as we will be hoisting up our commitment to the Amazon. France is one of the countries of the Amazon. We have French Guiana, which is located in the Amazon. So we'll be proposing new financing mechanisms so as to further protect the Amazon. Now, we shouldn't forget about Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Think about what's happening in the PNG, in Papua New Guinea, and Africa as well. There are forests there. That's a key objective. Therefore, everything we're going to be deploying, those country packages, are absolutely vital if we are to help preserve these forests. We are putting so much money into reforestation, but we also need to preserve existing forests. We're not doing that enough. We need those countries which have those forests. They might be losing out on economic opportunities by keeping these forests in the ground. So we need for the international community to help those countries. We also want to mention the Nice conference. An enormous collective effort was undertaken. I'd like to thank the UN, all of our partners, something that was spearheaded by us and our friends Costa Rica. We exceeded the 60% ratification threshold for the BBNG treaty. So great progress, but we need to strengthen collective work, protect the high seas. Thanks to the BBNG, we're now going to be working on implementation of that. The 30-30 Montreal objective, exclusive economic areas, protecting them. And I'd also like to invite you, in so much as possible, to join the deep-sea mining moratorium. That's absolutely essential if we are to preserve biodiversity. So we need to revitalize our efforts to protect oceans and forests. Also, the fight for financing, an important endeavor for Belém as well. The EU is taking action. We are the world's top donor. 28 billion euros were pledged. That's 1/4 of the world's climate finance. France, together with the French Development Agency, is mobilizing 7 billion euros for climate action. We've tripled our commitment over the last decade. Will continue to mobilize on international finance. Last but not least, aside from all these timelines, all of this action, what we want to be doing at Belém, the NDCs, and what I just mentioned, we must also continue this method, implementing this method, bringing everyone together, bringing together scientists, governments, companies, and NGOs. This method, part and parcel of it, is the Pact for People and Prosperity, the 4 Ps, which brings together 73 states and has come up with innovative initiatives thanks to this mobilization. I'll just mention a few. Kenya, Barbados, Spain, Somalia, Sierra Leone, Antigua and Barbuda. The list goes on. Many countries have committed to improvements in aviation, resilience, innovative financing. That's what it's called. We need to continue forging coalitions to mobilize innovative financing. With the UK, we've created a framework for biodiversity credits and essential mechanisms to achieve what I just mentioned on forests. Pilot projects have already been crafted. We have robust methodology so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past with carbon credits. We also need to further take into consideration climate vulnerability when allocating development bank financing, and that's the 4P reforming the big banks. To achieve this, we need to keep in mind a few simple principles. No country should have to choose between combating poverty and protecting the planet. Every country should be able to choose their own path. We need to increase funding funneled to the most vulnerable countries. It's a matter of justice, and it's these countries which are suffering the most from climate change. We need to mobilize private finance a lot more. That's at the heart of the World Bank and the IMF reforms. This is necessary to ensure we achieve this transition. And last but not least, science should be at the heart of our policies, of the decisions we take. Sometimes we hear narratives to the effect that climate issues, biodiversity, are up for debate. Some people say the science is not clear-cut, but I do believe the science is clear. Recognized scientists, eminent scientists, harbor no doubts. We defend open, free science so that we can underpin our decisions with that science. And that is why 800 IPCC scientists will be meeting later this year to continue driving ahead this agenda here at the United Nations so that we make good decisions. Thank you very much for your collective efforts. I thank you.
I thank the President of the French Republic and now welcome His Excellency Tshering Tobgay, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bhutan.
I thank the Secretary General for convening this important event and President Lula for his leadership as we prepare for COP30. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to present a preview from Bhutan's third nationally determined contribution, our enhanced commitment under the Paris Agreement. Bhutan is already carbon negative, absorbing 5 times more carbon dioxide than we emit, and over 70% of our land is under forest cover. We are determined to stay that way, even as we pursue sustainable growth, tackle poverty, and improve livelihoods. NDC 3.0 sets clear, quantifiable goals for 2035 and is integrated into our 10X economic roadmap and our updated long-term low-emission strategy. At its heart lies the Gyealuphu Mindfulness City, a bold model for low-emission, climate-resistant urban development. But our commitments come at a real cost. We forego hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year by not exploiting our natural resources. We spend 3.2% of our GDP on climate and biodiversity, which is among the highest in the world today. We subsidize rural electricity to reduce firewood use and have embedded climate education in our education system. Yet, the effects of the climate crisis are escalating. To cite but just one example, road restoration costs due to climate impact have risen by 112%, diverting much-needed funds for urgent development works. Bhutan is doing more than its fair share, but we cannot do it alone. We call on the international community for predictable finance, technology, and capacity support so that we can sustain our neutrality and resilience. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we want COP30 to be the implementation COP, where ambition is translated into delivery. Bhutan will lead by example, submitting NDC 3.0 ahead of COP30 with concrete, actionable targets. Projects like the Gyealuphu Mindfulness City and our RED Plus initiatives show how even a small, vulnerable nation can pioneer solutions anchored in nature and regenerative development. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to announce here that we will launch our NDC 3.0 in Laya, a nomadic highland community. The village is situated at over 4,000 meters above sea level. By doing so, we highlight the front line of climate change, melting glaciers, risks of glacial lake outburst floods, biodiversity loss, degraded pastures, and rising human-wildlife conflict. Highland communities all over the world, like Laya, are already living the consequences of climate change and need us to act on their behalf urgently. The time for rhetoric is over. Let us act decisively together. Thank you for your kind attention, and Teshidile.
I thank the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bhutan. Our next speaker is His Excellency Dick Schoof, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are now 10 years on since the Paris Agreement. 10 years of working hard nationally and internationally to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. I think it's fair to say that much has been achieved, but not enough. We need to pick up the pace as we remain committed to tackling climate change together. Only with a collective level of ambition equal to the scale of the challenge will we be able to deliver a sustainable future for all. More action and more international cooperation is essential to ensure a livable environment and to secure livelihoods for today's generation and for many generations to come. At the same time, the green transition offers enormous opportunities for attracting investment and stimulating trade in renewable energy, water management and food security. For us in the Netherlands, climate change and green growth are two sides of the same coin. And as we discussed the nationally determined contributions on our way to Belém, I think we should focus on the second word. We must stay determined. And I assure you, Europe and the Netherlands are determined. Our compliments to all the parties that already have published their new NDCs. We know how much effort has gone into this. The EU is preparing a joint NDC so that it can be submitted ahead of the COP30. Our emissions reductions targeted for 2035 will be in keeping with the proposed target for 2040 that will eventually be enshrined in law. As you know, and as you've heard from the chair of the Commission, the European Commission has proposed a target of 90%. In a union with 27 member states, it's important to allow the democratic process to run its course. We will be in time for Belém, and we will not disappoint the world. Setting targets is the first step. Implementing them is second. And it's only fair to admit that when we talk about a green transition, other interests are at stake as well. So we need to keep a realistic view, a realistic pace, and a realistic discussion, because we need everybody, everyone, people and business on board. And I'm happy to tell that the Kingdom of the Netherlands is definitely on board. We offer a world-class knowledge and expertise in areas such as water management, climate-smart agriculture, and renewable energy, such as green hydrogen. And we stand ready to work together with other countries and institutions through knowledge sharing, technology transfer, capacity building, and innovative forms of finance. Together, we must close the implementation gap and accelerate the green transition. In conclusion, to reach the outcomes of the global stocktake, we need to be determined. Determined in our commitment to follow through on the agreement we made 10 years ago, and determined to implement our NDCs together. Let us move forward at a faster pace, and let us reaffirm our deep commitment to the Paris Agreement. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Our next speaker is His Excellency Pedro Sanchez Perez Castillo, President of the Government of Spain.
Muchas gracias, Excelencia.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Devastating fires have affected Spain this past winter. Almost 400,000 hectares have burned so far this year, and it's more than a dozen states of the United Nations. However, the data is undeniable, and this has been the hottest summer since we've kept records, and the climate emergency is moving forward, and yet the ambition to face it, unfortunately, is backsliding. And this is unacceptable because we have to comply with what we agreed upon, and we have to present a new round of NDCs in line with the objective of 1.5 degrees centigrade, because our lives depend on it. And we have to redirect the course, and the COP30 in Belém is the place to do it. Spain is working with all of the other European partners in order to present an NDC at the European level in line with science and with the objective of reducing 90% of emissions by 2040. We have to move decisively. We can't backslide. And my country is working in 3 priority areas with respect to climate action, which I would like to share with you now. First of all, financing. We must continue to make concrete steps when it comes to financing to be credible in the fight against climate change. The Seville Commitment and the Seville Platform for actions adopted in the 4th Financing for Development Conference represents a milestone in strengthening international financing. And secondly, the fight against misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation does not only create confusion, it spreads false news, and in the framework of the climate emergency, it places at risk lives and property, and that is why climate disinformation as well is an actor that kills. And today I'd like to announce that Spain supports the Global Initiative for Informational Integrity on Climate Change, because it's not simply fighting hoaxes, it's about saving lives. And lastly, in last place, improving our prevention systems in the light of extreme climate phenomena, which unfortunately will be more frequent and more violent. And this is the reason behind the proposal that I'm making to all of the institutions and Spanish civil society, all of the political parties, to agree on a great state pact in the light of climate change. Because the threat that we are facing doesn't recognize ideologies, nor does it stop at borders. And that is why fighting the climate emergency is not an abstract idea. Unfortunately, our citizens, all of us, we must every day face this climate change that is advancing. It's a matter of protecting our houses, our jobs. It's protecting our way of life. Climate change not only kills, it also impoverishes our societies. And if some, for ideological reasons that have nothing to do with science, if they don't feel affected by this, well, at least they should motivate themselves for other people. Thank you.
I thank the President of Spain for his statement. Our next speaker is His Excellency Luis Alberto Arce Catacora, Constitutional President of the plurinational state of Bolivia.
Muchísimas gracias. Muy buenas tardes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, excellencies, and all of those who are here. The paradigm, the Western capitalist paradigm, anthropocentric, has placed humankind in the greatest challenge to its history, the climate crisis, creating a reality where, paradoxically, developing countries who are not the ones who are guilty of this, we suffer the most serious impacts. All of the countries must assume their commitments to live well in harmony and in balance with Mother Earth, and within the framework of the principles of equity and common but shared responsibilities. Developed countries that have greater responsibilities, historic responsibilities, must take leadership when it comes to resolving the climate crisis and guarantee financing, technology transfer, as well as capacity building for developing countries. The main message of the developed countries that we have heard at this summit must be to achieve carbon neutrality by the latest, by the year 2035. One real solution to the climate crisis also has to include the commitment of the United States, the country with the largest global historic emissions, to comply with their climate obligations within the framework of the Paris Agreement. Greenhouse gas emissions in Bolivia are minimal, but we assume our responsibility within the context of the Paris Agreement, and we have presented our NDC .3. However, without climate financing and means of implementation, our commitments will not be able to become a reality. Without a fair transition, an international transition, actions in our countries will always be inequitable and will be limited in achieving our right to development. Bolivia is a victim of the unjust energy transition. Bolivia has drastically reduced its production of fossil fuels, and with the lack of a just transition of being an exporting country, now we're importing fossil fuels, and we have to devote more resources to pay for the external debt. As a result, there are not global conditions for a just energy transition. Today, Bolivia can affirm that we have taken a historic step forward. On the 15th of July this year, our program for emission reductions due to deforestation, promoted by the indigenous government of Charagua and Gambay in our country, it was certified in the UN platform, placing us in the carbon international market with credits of high integrity and indigenous leadership. This milestone not only makes visible the climate ambition of the country, but it also shows that we have laid the basis to accede to climate financing, complying with 3 of the 5 conditions, and consolidating state capabilities and community capabilities. With vast forest areas and a potential for mitigation and also social benefits, our model can be replicated at the national level, especially in protected areas, in order to ensure effective protection. We have a registry of programs and projects along these lines, which are being fully developed, and we are moving forward in consolidating them with other management instruments. We are strengthening the protection information systems to guarantee transparency rights, and we will develop a mechanism to redistribute benefits, which is both just and transparent, which favors those who protect forests. We invite international cooperation as well as markets to accompany these sovereign efforts. Bolivia is ready to use measurable results, results of integrity, which would protect the Amazon as well as our entire ecosystem, generating well-being for our peoples and contributing concretely to the global goal of limiting global warming. We have assumed as a country the commitment to carry out significant and drastic reductions in deforestation of the Amazon by 2030 and strengthening the comprehensive conservation of our forests. However, without the provision of financing today and now, this task will be impossible. And that is why we would like to say that the Fund for Forests led by Brazil, and which will be launched in COP30, this should incorporate the provision of early resources and advanced resources for future results. We welcome the fact that Brazil would be the seat of COP30 in Belém, an emblematic symbol of the Amazon, convinced that multilateralism is the only path to overcome the climate emergency, and that in this COP, the leadership of Brazil will protect the interests of developing countries. Thank you very much.
I thank the Constitutional President of Bolivia. Our next speaker is His Excellent Jeremiah Manela, Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands.
Co-chairs, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we gather here today at a time when the impacts of climate change continue to define our shared future. Solomon Islands is positioned in a location where the impact of climate change is 3 times the global average. Climate change is a daily reality. eroding coastlines, sea level rise, biodiversity loss, and the frequency and intensity of disasters is placing stress on our people, economy, and livelihoods. We face a climate emergency that is not of our making. The NDCs are the cornerstone of the Paris Agreement that can place us on a 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. We are here today to renew our commitment to our people with ambitious climate action. Solomon Islands has done more than its fair share in submitting an ambitious third cycle net positive nationally determined contribution NDC commitment. Allow me to briefly explain. Our greenhouse gas emissions peaked in 2018 at 861.5 kilotons of carbon dioxide equivalent, excluding removals. Under a business as usual trajectory, our emissions were supposed to increase by 2% by 2035. However, our standing forests is removing greenhouse gases about 30 times more than our combined national greenhouse gas emissions. We are already net positive and determined to strengthen our net positive status. Our ambition can further be enhanced by 17% with new and additional international support in the form of finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. Ladies and gentlemen, our forests serve as carbon sink and currently absorbing approximately 26.3 million tons of carbon dioxide annually. With investments in reforestation and forest conservation, we have the potential to cut emissions by a further 34%, reducing projected 2035 emissions to around 798,000 tons per year. In closing, Solomon Islands urge all parties, especially major emitters, those with historical responsibility, to submit new, more ambitious NDCs that are aligned with the 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. COP30 in Belém is an opportunity for a recourse. Ambition delayed is 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway denied. We must act now with ambition. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands. Our next speaker is His Excellency Alexander van der Bellen, Federal President of the Republic of Austria.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are all seeing the writing on the wall, the temperature increase that is being recorded, plus 1.6 degrees Celsius globally, plus 3.1 degrees in Austria, double the global increase of temperature. The glaciers in Austria are disappearing. Then the wildfires, for instance, in Spain and Portugal, the floods, among others, in Austria 1 year ago, the rising sea levels threatening small island states in the Pacific. But there are positive messages too, some small, some bigger. Looking at my own country, Austria, I noticed that for the third consecutive year, the greenhouse gas emissions of Austria have decreased, summing up to a reduction of around 14%. Where there is a will, there is a way, and there is a will in Austria. We do take measures, bigger and smaller ones. For one, we support the presentation of the EU member states' joint NDCs at the COP30 in Belém. Secondly, we are currently finalizing a new climate law, laying the groundwork for our ambition to achieve climate neutrality by 2040, 10 years ahead of the EU's climate target. Thirdly, We will install a new governance structure, including a mechanism to involve state and non-state actors and an advisory board of climate and other scientists. And we have introduced the so-called climate check, ensuring that climate policies are mainstreamed across all sectors of policy making. The energy transition is in full speed in Austria. On top of our already existing hydropower capacity, there's a rapidly growing wind and solar energy sector, every day taking us a step further towards our goal of 100% green power generation by 2030. And yes, like so many other countries, we also face budgetary constraints. But inaction would end up being far more expensive than investing now in a climate-neutral economy, which is why Austria will continue to contribute appropriately to international climate finance and is actively engaged in the UN Climate and Security Mechanism. Ladies and gentlemen, many other bigger and smaller positive messages are around the corner. Of some of them we have heard today. And I hope that COP30 in Belém will witness an ambitious coalition of member states willing and ready to change course. Austria will be there standing with you. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Federal President of the Republic of Austria. Our next speaker is His Excellency Americo Ramos, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of São Tomé and Príncipe.
Excelências,
Excellencies, heads of state, distinguished delegates, it is a great honor and with great sense of responsibility that I direct my words to this illustrious audience in the name of the people and the government of the Republic Democratic of São Tomé and Príncipe. In spite of us having a small area, we reaffirm our commitment to the global response to the climate problem. We are naturally a carbon sink due to the richness of our ecosystems, which cover more than half of our national territory. Nonetheless, we don't limit ourselves to that role. We reaffirm our ambition of net zero as delineated in our national decarbonization plan and reflected in our NDCs 3.0, which will be officially presented before COP30. Allow me to highlight some central measures of our NDC 3.0. We have increased the NDC 2.0 goals for reducing emissions to 27% to 36% by 2035, based on the national inventory of 2018. We have committed to increase the participation of the share of renewables in our grid to up to 50% by 2035, along with robust efficiency measures. NDC 3.0 places adaptation at the center of our activities as far as infrastructure, tourism, biodiversity are concerned, trying to quantify for the first time the costs of adaptation measures. We are strengthening our efforts, including gender equality and including the youth in our efforts. Excellencies, as far as in the name of ecological protection, we are passing Law 820, which will prohibit the production of plastic bags, an important measure to end pollution by plastics. We have a national strategy of transitioning us to a blue economy with a plan to make these strategic goals real. We are also renewing our third national plan and strategy for biodiversity, as well as our biodiversity financial plan to try to reverse the loss of biodiversity and thus guarantee the resiliency of our ecosystems. Our country is ready to explore high-impact initiatives, including the Santiago network, to try to deal with losses and damages. We are committed, but we also realize that we will never reach these goals by ourselves. In this context, we realize we acknowledge the Secretary of the Secretary General, and especially through the climate promise, São Tomé and Príncipe is benefiting from technical, the UNDPs, the FAOs, and many other entities who are collaborating with us. We call for all our partners, be they government, private, or from civil society, that they redouble their efforts to reach the ambitious goals of NDC 3.0 so that we can have concrete results. Together, we can guarantee that small island states and developing states, in spite of their vulnerabilities, can be leader in climate action and can be an example for the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
The Democratic Republic of São Tomé and Príncipe. Our next speaker is His Excellency John Briceño, Prime Minister of Belize.
Thank you very much, co-chairs and excellencies. Belize reaffirms our commitment, our unwavering commitment to the Paris Agreement and the 1.5-degree goal. 1.5 is not an aspiration. It is a threshold between hope and hardship, between flourishing communities and forced displacement, between shared prosperity and irreversible loss. Since our first nationally determined contribution in 2016, we have consistently raised our ambition. Today, our NDC 3.0 charts an even bolder course, strengthening our 2030 targets, and for the first time, setting 2035 target goals aligned with our long-term low-emission development strategy. Our NDC 3.0 delivers concrete action, expanding renewable electricity generation from 53% to cover 75% of domestic needs by 2030 and 80% by 2035, restoring 25,000 hectares of degraded forest and implementing sustainable land management on 90,000 hectares, or 3% of our land territory by 2030, doubling our carbon sequestration from 2.5 million tons in 2030 to 5.1 million tons in 2035, protecting and restoring 2,500 hectares of mangroves while safeguarding an additional 8,000 hectares. Since submitting NDC 3.0, my government has committed to plant 1 million trees by 2028. Belize's NDC 3.0 is expanding marine biodiversity protection to cover 30% of Belize's ocean by 2026, and driving emissions reductions across energy, waste, and agriculture. But let me be clear, ambition can only succeed if matched by support. For small, climate-vulnerable nations like Belize, this means scaled-up, predictable finance, accessible technology, and genuine partnerships. The science is unforgiving. The window for 1.5 degrees Celsius is closing rapidly. Belize will continue to lead with ambition, but the success of our NDC 3.0 and the global goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius depends on all of us, acting with unprecedented urgency, solidarity, and climate justice. Thank you.
The next speaker is His Excellency Fustan Archange Touadéa, President of the Central African Republic.
Excellence.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a great responsibility for me to speak on behalf of the Central African Republic here in this chamber where the future of humanity hangs in the balance. My country, located in the heart of Africa, portrays the brutal reality of climate change, drought, flooding, deforestation, biodiversity loss. All of the above are intensifying year in, year out, making people already poverty-stricken more vulnerable, people who are suffering food insecurity and humanitarian crises. The Central African Republic, although it's one of the smallest emitters of greenhouse gases, is paying a disproportionate price through the crises which we didn't contribute to. This situation compels us to take the floor to recall that climate justice and global solidarity should be turned into deeds instead of simply remaining good intentions. Excellencies, we know that the world has fallen behind. 2 months remain before the COP30. Only 40-odd countries, however, have submitted their renewed NDCs. And this despite the fact that scientists are recalling the urgency of maintaining the 1.5 degrees objective. The big emitters responsible for 80% of emissions have not yet submitted responses in keeping with the challenges we face. Piecemeal solutions are insufficient. History shows that we can undergo transformation, and the COP is an opportunity for us to deliver measurable results, for our people. The Africa region is taking action with the support of the World Bank and the Global Environment Fund. We have launched the Plea project aimed at promoting resilient infrastructure. This project is nature-based. It will strengthen urban resilience in Bibarati and Bangui. Specifically, it will benefit 300,000 people. It will create 3,500 green jobs, especially for women and young people. That's what it means, moving from commitments to results. Furthermore, we have a national strategy for the sustainable management of 7 million hectares, which are well protected, and some of them on the UNESCO Intangible Heritage list. It's not just about conservation. This is our direct contribution to striking a global climate equilibrium. Ladies and gentlemen, in September of last year in Addis Ababa at the African Summit, the African Climate Summit, Africa spoke with one voice. Accelerating climate solutions and financing for green and resilient development is what we called for. The Central African Republic is unswervingly committed to the above. We are promoting homegrown, inclusive solutions that are rooted in our communities. We are calling for equitable, direct, and streamlined access to climate financing which is currently inaccessible and far too complex for vulnerable countries. We also want to swiftly see the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund so that frontline countries can address the disasters threatening their very survival. Our ambition is clear-cut. We want resilient green cities. We want to use nature to protect us, to ensure that we can resist climate shocks. We want to build low-carbon economies that generates jobs and hope for our young people. We want climate governance that's equitable and inclusive, in which all citizens become agents of the transition. However, to get there, we need much more than pronouncements. We need climate integrity, consistency between what we say here and what we do back in our countries. Excellencies, partners, history is looking at what we do. Any delays, any missed deadlines results in lives lost, in generations sacrificed. The Central African Republic would like to reiterate our commitment to being a resolute actor of the fight for our climate. And we'd like to underscore that a fight waged by one country is not enough. What is called for is real operational global solidarity. We do not have the right to be indifferent. We no longer have the right to the status quo. We have a shared but differentiated responsibility through which we can transform this crisis into an opportunity to build a fair, low-carbon and sustainable future for all. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Central African Republic. The next speaker is His Excellency Gaston Brown, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. For small island developing states, global decarbonization is not optional. It is a matter of justice. For over a century, the fossil fuel economy concentrated wealth and power in a few nations and industries. Those who profited most should now shoulder the cost of rapid, orderly, and fair transition. This is the polluter pays principle in action. Antigua and Barbuda has endorsed the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative to create a rules-based phase-out of coal, oil, and gas backed by finance and technology. Climate change is a threat multiplier. It magnifies every vulnerability and accelerates every injustice. The farmer without irrigation loses his crop entirely. The fisher without insurance loses his boat and livelihood. Meanwhile, the large polluters rebuild and even expand. Across the Caribbean, the Pacific, and Africa, loss and damage is not a projection. It is our daily reality. For SIDS, holding a line at 1.5 degrees is non-negotiable. It is quintessential to our survival. Science confirms that fossil fuel emissions are contributing to climate change and that an overshoot of the 1.5 degrees will trigger irreversible damage. Law, to include the advisory opinions, tell us that it is a binding benchmark, not a bargaining chip. Morality tells us that we cannot abandon it. Every fraction of a degree beyond 1.5 multiplies injustice. Stronger storms, higher seas, deeper loss and damage. Attribution science proves that the consequences of floods, storms, droughts, heat waves, and sea level rise destroying our countries are a direct consequence of emissions that we did not create. Attribution science also provides the evidence to hold the large polluters accountable. And I say to this august body that if diplomacy fails, then we should use the courts to hold these large polluters accountable. Without the attribution science, loss and damage risk would be dismissed as charity rather than recognized as responsibility. The global finance system remains unfit for purpose. IFIs and multilateral banks are not as responsive as they ought to be. Adaptation, for example, will cost up to $387 billion annually, and loss and damage already runs in the hundreds of billions. However, the climate funding for adaptation and mitigation remains grossly inadequate, and there is little funding available to fuel the urgent transition needed. Fairness demands equitable participation in the transition to include access to quality technologies, durable, efficient, low-carbon solutions at costs comparable to fossil fuels, protection from unfair burdens, finance at scale, that is concessional financing, primarily non-debt creating flows for renewable energy, clean transport, and resilient infrastructure. And it also requires capacity building, that is investments in people and institutions to sustain a net zero future. Colleagues, Antigua and Barbuda's National Adaptation Plan charts a clear path, and our updated NDC this year will move us closer to a green, resilient future. From survival to justice, that is our call today. Let us treat the 1.5-degree limit as a lifeline, not as a line in the sand. Let us make the polluter pays principle the foundation of a fair transition. And let us act not tomorrow, but today, so that the smallest and most vulnerable nations among us are not left to face the greatest storms alone. Finally, let us continue to fight to accelerate the transition to renewables in protecting our planet and certainly in the interests of all of humanity. I thank you.
Thank you, Antigua and Barbuda. The next speaker is His Excellency Sitiveni Liga Mamada Rabuka, Prime Minister of the Republic of Fiji.
Co-Chair, Your Excellencies, may I apologize for the very long name. It is an honor to address you today and to present the content of Fiji's third NDC. Fiji's revised NDC responds with the appropriate scale of actions and across its element demonstrates a leveling up of our vision and our commitment. Fiji has pledged to increase our energy sector emissions reduction target from 30 to 36%. Your Excellencies, our NDC is our prospectus to support access to the means of implementation, the finance and technology, and the expertise required to supplement our resources. Fiji is firmly committed to harnessing indigenous forms of energy and the phasing out of fossil fuel use. We also target to produce 100% of our electricity from renewable energy sources by 2035. Fiji's revised NDC is more than a requirement under the Paris Agreement. Realistically, the scale of our nation's goals and their achievability depend heavily on the NDCs and the actions of major global players and emitters. The ICJ advisory opinion confirmed that states have a binding obligation to act in line with science, fairness, and equity. Large polluters must take responsibility. Substantial and rapid and sustainable measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The advisory was also clear non-proliferation of fossil fuels should be a priority in order to keep within the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. COP30 in Belen must be the turning point with ambitious yet feasible NDCs. I urge my fellow leaders, you ladies and gentlemen, to take courage with the political will, the resources and relentless drive to do what is right for humanity, for a sustainable future for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Republic of Fiji. The next speaker is His Excellency Ala Karis, President of the Republic of Estonia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Honored colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Climate change is the greatest challenge of our time. It destroys homes, livelihoods, and ecosystems while fueling instability and insecurity. COP30 in Brazil must be a turning point with strong action plans aligned with the Paris Agreement. 10 years after its adoption, we now see real progress in clean technologies, competitive industries, and opportunities for a just transition. Excellencies, Estonia is fully committed to climate neutrality by 2050 and to multilateral climate cooperation. We have already reduced emissions by 63% compared to 1990, showing our determination to meet future goals. As part of EU, our NDC for COP30 reflects this strong commitment and responsibility to secure our nature and climate. Tripling renewable energy production by 2030, as agreed during COP28 in Dubai, is the most effective way to reduce emissions. Once dependent on oil shale, Estonia now generates around 40% of its electricity from renewables, with solar capacity growing 25 times in just 5 years. By 2035, we aim for 80% clean electricity. Together with Finland and Latvia, we are building new electricity connections to support renewable energy. We will soon adopt the Climate Resilience Economy Act, aligning climate, economic, and nature policies. By law, 30% of land and sea will be protected, and the new vehicle tax is already steering drivers towards cleaner cars. Colleagues, innovation is central to our approach. Estonia develops smart rainwater system to reduce flood risks and applies digital and responsible AI tools for smart energy, precision agriculture, and climate monitoring. We strengthen resilience and evidence-based policy making. As new technologies can also sometimes bring along environmental impacts and dependencies, the green transition must remain sustainable. Estonia shares our technical and digital expertise globally and contributes €1.5 million annually to developing countries to tackle climate change. Yet nearly 20% of the world still lacks electricity, and over 2 billion people rely on polluting cooking fuels that harm both health and the environment, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. With solar and wind now affordable, clean energy must reach everyone. Finally, Russia's war against Ukraine reminds us that conflict intensifies environmental destruction and global insecurity, with constant bombardments, poisoning ecosystems, and harming health. Climate change or climate action is therefore also a peace and security issue. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Republic of Estonia. The next speaker is His Excellency Jose Ulysses Correa e Silva, Prime Minister of Republic of Cabo Verde, you have the floor.
Obrigado. Cabo Verde.
Thank you. Cape Verde is an African place. It's in the group of countries that produces very few carbon emissions and suffers a lot of impact of the climate change. The hurricanes that affect the U.S. were going to affect the U.S. and the island of St. Vincent was affected. Torrential rains caused sudden floods, loss of life, displacement of families, destruction of infrastructure, and several $1 million of damage. These are increasingly frequent extreme meteorological phenomena, a warning about the urgency of strengthening resilience and protecting lives. Like other countries, we are at the forefront to be preparing our NDC 3.0, which will be issued at the end of October. Our goal is to accelerate the just transition, protect the most vulnerable people. We are going to align ambition with credibility, results, and accountability. We want to accelerate the energy transition. Our goal is to achieve more than 50% of electricity produced through renewable energy by 2030 and to get to more than 80% in 2024. It's a simple initiative, but costs money, like public lighting, 100% on LED. This reduces consumption in 30% and reduces carbon emission by 1,300 tons per year. This transition is positive on the balance sheet. It's a positive impact in terms of the energy resources and in carbon emission. The energy transition is not an ideological matter, and it's not a doctrine matter, especially regarding those that defend ecosystem questions. It has a social impact, an environmental impact, and we need adaptation centered in people and science. In terms of water, we have ecosystems, land ecosystems, and maritime ecosystems. We have priorities. We have priorities to these systems. People with deficiencies along the shore or communities along the interior, we will give assistance to them. The next round of NDCs will only comply with the Paris Agreement if it is accompanied by means compatible with urgency, especially for adaptation. We have internal resources to face emergencies. So what happened in São Vicente? We have an emergency fund, a national emergency fund that mobilized more than $10 million. But it won't be enough because we will be more resilient, and more resiliency demands more investment. Thank you very much.
His Excellency Philip Edward Davis, Prime Minister of the Bahamas. You have the floor.
Your Excellencies, thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, we are at an inflection point in our planet's history. As we mark the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, We have a choice: advance ambitious climate action plans for the sake of people and our planet, or retreat, sacrificing lives, livelihoods, cultures, and biodiversity. 6 days ago, on leaving my country, we were being threatened by a hurricane called Gabriel. Thankfully, we were spared. As I stand here at this very moment, there are two systems that are threatening my country: AL3 and AL94. And each of them have been predicted to be impacting my islands. The frequency and intensity of hurricanes is real. It's no hoax. It's not a con job. The 1.5-degree Paris temperature goal is on life support, and our actions ahead of COP30 and beyond will give it the opportunity to either survive or we accept that we have come to the end of a singular call for the hope of humanity. It is clear that some of the most ambitious nationally determined contributions in the world are from developing countries, particularly small island developing states, and notably in the Caribbean region. And while small island developing states emit less than 0.01% of greenhouse gases, the ambitious climate action goals we set out in our NDCs are being proposed not only to curb emissions, but to build in adaptation, climate resilience, and sustainable development co-benefits. However, the means of implementing our NDCs are largely conditionally based on the availability of financial resources, largely from international partners. And despite limited finances, we in the Bahamas have taken the approach to be solution-oriented in the fight against climate change. In our pre-2030 NDCs, the Bahamas established a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030. This goal is being driven by increasing the provision of renewable energy sources by 30% and addressing technological advancements in the transportation sector by setting a target of electric vehicles to represent 35% and hybrid vehicles representing 15% of vehicle sales by the year 2030. Our preliminary data has shown that my government's efforts via our new energy era policy, which focuses on energy efficiency, upgrades, utility-scale solar power in our nation's capital, new hybrid grids in our family of islands, and deployment of modern technology, will result in our country exceeding our 2030 renewable energy goal by 2%, with 32% renewable energy penetration across our archipelago. The Bahamas is keen to accelerate its new trajectory in the energy and transportation sectors through robust and ambitious measures for NDC 3.0. We have taken steps to support these advancements with policy and legislative measures that clearly outline the need for sustainable development, resilient infrastructure, and the provision of government-driven incentives to support private sector investments. And while these efforts are notable, our updated 2022 NDC has shown an imbalance in climate finance inflows into the Bahamas. Nearly $155 million was received between 2010 and 2020, with $140 million earmarked for mitigation actions and $50 million for adaptation. We have shown a willingness to document our priorities, outline our plans, secure partnerships, and make legislative and policy changes, but adaptation has to be better supported by international partners, and it must be balanced. We are a small country, but we punch above our weight because we know that protecting our climate will ensure a future for our islands and our people. We not only have a moral duty, but a legal imperative to address climate action as a global community. The Bahamas remain committed to the Paris Agreement, to advancing ambitious climate action plans, and submitting our NDC 3.0 ahead of COP30 in Belém. And we call on other parties to do the same. As I've said before, The time for business as usual is over. The time for bold, transformative action is now. So let us seize this moment together to save our planet and our humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahamas. The next speaker is His Excellency Wesley Simina, President of the Federated States of Micronesia. You have the floor.
Thank you, co-chairs, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Debating whether climate change is real or not is a distraction and a waste of precious time we do not have. For small island developing states like Micronesia, it is a crisis we live with every day. The impacts are constant. King tides, storms, droughts, saltwater intrusion, and shifting rainfall devastate our 600+ islands, threaten our water and food security, and endanger our ancestral sites. Last year, severe droughts forced us to declare a state of emergency, showing how quickly circumstances can turn dire at the front line of this crisis. Yet, the global response lags far behind the science. While the facts are clear, why is urgent action still missing? Humanity continues to face disaster after disaster. And for small island nations like ours, the devastation is catastrophic. Micronesia has never shied away from climate leadership. We called early for a phase down of harmful chemicals, was first to sign the PB&J Treaty, and helped lead the global methane pledge. Our new NDC and methane roadmap to be launched at COP30 renew this commitment with pathways grounded in science. But these require solidarity, for no country can meet the challenge alone. Future generations deserve a tomorrow that is healthy and resilient. We owe it to them to curb emissions, scale up ambition, and nurture leadership. Limiting fossil fuel use is not enough. The FSM continues to call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty and welcomes the invitation from Colombia to host the first international conference on the equitable phase-out of fossil fuels. To keep 1.5 alive and secure our survival, we must act now, for us today and for all generations to come. I thank you.
Thank you, Federated States of Micronesia. The next speaker. Thank you, Federated States of Micronesia. The next speaker is His Excellency Alamea Halimna, Prime Minister of the Republic of Chad. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, je prends la parole au nom du maréchal Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno, Président de la République, chef de l'État du Tchad, au nom du peuple tchadien, de ces millions de femmes, d'hommes et d'enfants confrontés à une urgence vitale, le changement climatique. Le Tchad, pays sahélien au cœur de l'Afrique, incarne aujourd'hui la réalité du changement climatique. Dans mon pays, les lacs s'assèchent, les villages se vident, les terres s'épuisent et notre jeunesse est contrainte à l'exil, non pas par choix, mais guidée par l'instinct de survie. Le lac Tchad, autrefois mer intérieure qui nourrissait nos terres et nos communautés, dont dépend la vie de 30 millions d'âmes, issus des 4 bassins des pays du bassin, a perdu en un demi-siècle plus de 90% de sa superficie. Sa disparition progressive a détruit nos écosystèmes naturels, a appauvri des millions de riverains et a contribué à alimenter les tensions et conflits autour de l'accès aux ressources naturelles. À cette épreuve climatique s'ajoute une autre menace tout aussi implacable, la menace persistante de la secte Boko Haram dans le bassin du lac Tchad. Déjà appauvri par la sécheresse et frappé par les inondations, des milliers de riverains doivent fuir leur village pour échapper aux violences, subissant ainsi une double peine, celle du climat et celle du terrorisme. Face à cette double peine, le Tchad ne peut lutter seul, et pourtant, nous agissons seuls. Notre contribution déterminée au niveau national, actualisée en 2021, illustre notre engagement à réduire nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 19,3% d'ici 2030 par rapport au scénario de référence, tout en renforçant notre résilience climatique. Actuellement, nous sommes en train de réviser notre CDN 3.0 pour mieux nous adapter et réduire nos émissions. Mesdames et messieurs distingués invités, vous conviendrez avec moi que la protection des populations face aux effets du changement climatique est à la fois un impératif humanitaire et une action essentielle pour assurer le développement durable de nos communautés. Dans cette perspective, le Tchad présentera à la COP 30 à Belém une feuille de route articulée autour de 4 axes majeurs. 1. La mise en place d'un guichet unique pour les contextes fragiles au sein des institutions financières climatiques, doté de procédures accélérées et de critères d'éligibilité adaptés à nos réalités. 2. Intégrer le nexus climat, paix et sécurité dans tous les mécanismes de financement, reconnaissant que les investissements climatiques contribuent à la prévention des conflits. 3. Multiplier les plateformes nationales comme instruments d'innovation pour permettre aux pays vulnérables de devenir pleinement acteurs de leur propre transformation. 4. Respecter les engagements de financement climatique en adaptant les mécanismes aux réalités des contextes fragiles. Au Tchad, nous refusons de subir. Nous continuons à agir pour la planète. En 2030, nous voulons un Tchad à la Grande Muraille verte. Ce projet panafricain, écologique et ambitieux pour protéger nos terres, où nos communautés sont préparées et alertées face aux catastrophes et où chaque enfant puisse naître et grandir dans un environnement sûr et durable. Pour atteindre cette vision, la solidarité internationale doit se traduire en actions concrètes et immédiates. Ensemble, nous pouvons faire de la COP 30 un tournant historique où l'ambition climatique devient le moteur de la croissance, l'encre des alliances stratégiques et la démonstration que le multilatéralisme fonctionne quand il est soutenu par l'ambition et la mise en œuvre. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Republic of Chad. The next speaker is His Excellency James Marape, Prime Minister of the Independent State of Papua New Guinea. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellency Secretary General, Excellency President Lula, I know both of them are absent, but the system is registering our conversation. I want to thank them for hosting this important session. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me firstly acknowledge the leadership of the United Nations and the Secretary General for always championing the climate change action and climate justice. I thank also President Lula and Brazil for convening this timely meeting as we head towards COP30, and I reaffirm Papua New Guinea's support. As a forest and ocean nation, we stand with Brazil for COP30, and we equally offer our support for Australia's bid for COP31 so that the world recognizes the central role that forests and oceans play in climate change mitigation. Papua New Guinea is both a victim of climate change, but also equally a provider of solutions. As custodians of world's third largest forest, tropical rainforest, I beg your pardon, and vast oceans, which are host or houses 7% of world's biodiversity, we are one of planet Earth's greatest natural carbon sink. Despite our small carbon footprint, we will join Brazil at COP30 to advocate that the big polluters and high-emission industries must pay for forest and ocean nations to keep our trees standing and our corals alive. It is the forests and the oceans in their natural state that will maintain the carbon balance required for life on Earth. As at home, Papua New Guinea, we are doing our part. Through our enhanced NDC, we are scaling up renewable energies. We are also working to commit to net zero deforestation by 2030. We are also finalizing a blue national carbon policy to safeguard our mangroves, our seagrass, our coastal ecosystems, and our biodiversity. We are also reinvesting in climate-resilient infrastructure and early warning systems for our people. But ambition requires resources. For Papua New Guinea, the cost of delivering our commitment is estimated to the cost of $7.7 billion by 2030. We therefore call for scaled-up finance, technology transfer, and stronger global partnerships. We thank at this juncture the Green Climate Fund for their commitment to support and the remittance of funds to support some of the programs in Papua New Guinea. At COP30, we need to launch a public-private partnership, in our view, to fulfill paragraph 34 of the Global Stocktake that talks about reversing global deforestation by 2030. That goal will never be achieved unless we dramatically scale up finance now. We need this on the COP30 agenda, and it must be launched in Belém. In conclusion, Papua New Guinea joins Brazil and other forest nations in offering both our forests and oceans a solution to the climate crisis. Together, let us ensure a resilient, prosperous, and sustainable future for our children and generations to come. I thank you all.
Thank you, Papua New Guinea. The next speaker is His Excellency Terence Michael Drew, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Secretary General, let me thank you for this most important meeting. Excellency President Lula of Brazil, next President of COP30, you can count on St. Kitts and Nevis for its support. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, all. As we gather today under the shadow of rising temperatures, escalating climate disasters, and widening ambition gaps, two tropical storms now churn ominously in the Atlantic. For small island developing states like mine, this is a relentless reality. Just last year, our Caribbean neighbors in Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines endured devastating impacts. And even as we speak, families across the region remain in a state of anxious watchfulness because in our part of the world, hurricane season doesn't just bring storms, it brings a threat of lost lives, lost livelihoods, and lost decades of development. This is a story we know too well. And yet, what is most striking is not the frequency of disaster, but the scarcity of adequate response. We are not as victims, but as defenders of humanity, as leaders of nations that have contributed the least to this crisis, but stand to lose the most. We come as stalwart advocates for climate justice and equitable development. At its core, the choice before us is one of justice. Mr. Secretary General, we hear your call, we share your sense of urgency, and through our contribution to global emissions is negligible, our commitment is undeniable. As of September 2025, the internal drafting of our National Determined Contribution 3.0 is nearly complete. We expect to launch stakeholder consultations in October of this year and to finalize and submit our updated NDC ahead of COP30 in Brazil. The updated National Greenhouse Gas Inventory, the final critical component, is also on track for completion with international support by late October. We are developing our NDC 3.0 in tandem with a comprehensive national adaptation plan, a fully integrated, inclusive, and evidence-based process supported by partners such as Climate Analytics, the NDC Partnership, and the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center through a US $2.99 million GCF Readiness Fund. Our targets are sector-specific and anchored in national development priorities. In agriculture, our Climate Smart Agriculture project is underway. In health, we are partnering with PAHO and World Health Organization to climate-proof our healthcare infrastructure. In marine and coastal ecosystems, we are expanding marine management areas and advancing aquaculture development. In tourism, a revised sector strategy is being finalized by mid-2026. In education, climate literacy will be mainstreamed across the school system next year. In energy, geothermal energy remains our greatest hope, along with solar energy and wind energy. We mean business. Our governance framework is being transformed to reflect the full spectrum of climate ambition, from mitigation to adaptation to loss and damage. Colleagues, excellencies, we urge our partners in the global north to act as well, to act with urgency. Let this gathering, therefore, be remembered as a turning point and a moment when the world finally did what it had to do, what it had promised, which is to stand up for those who have long stood on the front line of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, St. Kitts and Nevis. The next speaker is His Excellency Kashim Shettima, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You have the floor.
Your Excellency.
President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a profound honor to address this pivotal dialogue on climate change at a moment when our planet stands at a crossroads. The climate emergency demands not just words, but courageous and sustained leadership. For Nigeria, a country acutely vulnerable to climate impacts, climate action is not a choice. It is an existential necessity. Mr. President, to mobilize resources, we have undertaken significant domestic reforms. We have simplified and modernized our tax laws to ease compliance, removed unproductive fossil fuel subsidies, reduced burdens on households and businesses, and enhanced revenue efficiency. At the same time, we are strengthening our business environment through legislation and policies that improve the ease of doing business, to attract private capital and expand opportunities for investment in clean energy and sustainable infrastructure. In March 2025, we launched the Nigeria Carbon Market Activation Policy, which establishes a robust framework for high-integrity emissions reductions while positioning Nigeria as a credible hub for Article 6 voluntary and compliance carbon markets. Through this mechanism, our target is to mobilize up to $2.2 billion by 2030 in high-quality credits and related investments. Mr. President, we are under no illusion. No country can tackle the climate crisis alone. Like other developing nations, Nigeria requires significant support to implement effective mitigation and adaptation strategies. We therefore call on international financial institutions, notably the World Bank, IMF, and African Development Bank, to scale up financing for climate action. Likewise, developed countries must honor their climate finance commitments, including the $100 US billion annually pledged under the Paris Agreement. As a demonstration of our unwavering commitment, Nigeria has updated its nationally determined contributions NDC 3.0 in line with UNFCCC guidance. This enhanced NDC reflects greater ambition, integrating mitigation and adaptation measures to safeguard our people, protect ecosystems, and accelerate inclusive growth. It was formally submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat on September 21st. This NDC 3.0 departs from the business-as-usual approach to an absolute economy-wide emission reduction, our highest ambition level to date. The targets are better defined and will be supported by an investment plan to accelerate its implementation. Nigeria's NDC 3.0 commits to significantly increasing mitigation and adaptation ambitions with clearer target compared to NDC 2.0. Within the LULUCF sector, Nigeria aims to lower the deforestation rate by 60%, which offers a substantial mitigation potential of 304.8 metric CO2 equivalent, while also pursuing a mitigation potential of 34.4 MT CO2 equivalent by increasing forest area to reforestation and afforestation. Increasingly, adaptation, the adoption and use of cleaner energy systems, especially in manufacturing and industries. We are increasing captive generation capacity using cleaner fuels by installing 7 GW, 50% renewable and 50% natural gas for a practical energy mix plan on our journey to net zero by 2060. Electrifying key sectors such as public transport, industry and others while implementing national energy efficiency standards to deliver absolute reductions in energy intensity by 2030. 5, advancing decarbonization pathways for oil and gas, mining, cement and other heavy industries with transparent annual reporting and accountability mechanisms. And 6, for the first time, health and action for climate empowerment have been included as priority sectors in our NDC 3.0, demonstrating our commitment to an economy-wide climate governance. On adaptation and resilience, we are scaling climate-smart agriculture to reach 5 million smallholder farms by 2030, increasing yields by 20 to 30%, and expanding drought-resistant crops. We are building resilient infrastructure, integrating early warning systems, climate-informed urban planning, and resilient housing to reduce climate-related damages by 50%. We plan to restore mangroves, forests, and wetlands to enhance carbon sinks by 200 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, cumulatively by 2030, while protecting biodiversity and livelihoods. Nigeria aims to lower the deforestation rate by 60%, and to deliver on these commitments, Nigeria is mobilizing US $20 to $25 billion in climate finance by 2030, including green bonds, blended finance, and public-private risk-sharing mechanisms. We aim to unlock at least 7 to 10 billion US in grants and concessional finance from global partners, while promoting technology transfer, regional energy integration, and green entrepreneurship to drive inclusive growth. Institutionally, Nigeria has established the National Council on Climate Change, supported by a cross-ministerial secretariat to ensure coherence, accountability, and measurable results. We have adopted a transparent monitoring, reporting, and verification system aligned with global best practices to track progress annually. Already, solar mini-grids power over 150 rural communities, while nature-based solutions have reduced flood damage by over 40% in coastal areas, improved fisheries, and sequestered carbon. Mr. President, finally, Nigeria's climate action is anchored on social equity. Women, youth, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and vulnerable communities are at the heart of our transition. Social protection, reskilling, and just transition programs are in place to ensure that no one is left behind. We therefore call on global partners to to scale up concessional finance, knowledge sharing, and technology transfer to accelerate not just Nigeria's transition, but Africa's contribution to a safer, more sustainable world. In closing, Mr. President, let me reaffirm. For Nigeria, climate action is not a trade-off between growth and sustainability. It is the pathway to sustainable growth, innovation, security, and shared prosperity. We stand ready to work with all partners to lead where necessary and to deliver, because the time for climate action is now. I thank you for your audience.
Thank you, Nigeria. We now move on to interventions from ministers, and interventions are limited to 2 minutes. The next speaker is His Excellency Dion George, Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. You have the floor.
Excellencies, colleagues, every country on this planet has a responsibility to act to prevent the further warming of our planet and the devastation caused by climate change. South Africa is determined to play its part, informed by the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capability. In line with the Paris Agreement, guided by its national circumstances, South Africa will strengthen its commitment to the multilateral climate process. South Africa is currently completing its second nationally determined contribution document for the period of implementation from 2031 to 2035. In determining its NDC, South Africa has demonstrated ambition. It has also identified 8 adaptation goals that are related to the Sustainable Development Goals. The aim is to enhance the resilience of local communities against climate impacts. The draft NDC document further presents and positions the importance of having to plan for loss and damage, impacts and associated escalating costs. It presents a case for increased access to financial support, including technology transfer and capacity building. On just transition, the draft NDC document prioritizes a fair, just and equitable transition that enables social inclusion. South Africa submitted its first biennial transparency report in December 2024 and remains committed to report and account on progress made in line with Paris Agreement requirements. To make this progress meaningful, it is essential that all countries honour their commitments to reduce emissions and ensure sufficient support to countries that are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. The next speaker is His Excellency Ruslan Adalgeriev, Aide to the President and Special Representative on Climate of the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Уважаемый господин председатель, уважаемые коллеги, Российская Федерация ответственно подходит к деятельности на климатическом направлении, считаем КИКОН и Парижское соглашение надежной основой для долгосрочного климатического урегулирования. Сегодня я имею честь сообщить, что Россия представляет свой последовательный, более амбициозный АНУФ. К 1935 году мы намерены сократить выбросы парниковых газов на 65-67% относительно 1990 года. В очередной раз подтверждаем серьезность своих намерений по достижению углеродной нейтральности не позднее 60-го года. Подчеркну, что Россия перешла от стратегии к практической реализации, создав надежную национальную архитектуру для декарбонизации с учетом приоритета активной цифровизации, электрификации, создания новых высокотехнологических отраслей и высокопроизводительных рабочих мест. Во-первых, мы тестируем самые передовые инструменты в Сахалинской области. Был запущен региональный эксперимент по квотированию выбросов для крупнейших эмитентов. В результате регион достиг углеродной нейтральности раньше установленного срока. Этот успех доказывает эффективность выбранного подхода и послужит моделью для будущего масштабирования углеродного регулирования. Во-вторых, мы создали прозрачную работающую инфраструктуру для вовлечения частного сектора в деятельность по сокращению выбросов парниковых газов и повышению их поглощению. Сформирован реестр углеродных единиц, утверждены национальные стандарты в сфере климата, также имплементированы международные стандарты ИСО, функционирует институт аккредитации органов валидации и верификации парниковых газов. Это создает предсказуемую среду для реализации климатических проектов бизнесом. Россия представляет свой АНУ в условиях беспрецедентного санкционного давления. Против нашей страны введены колоссальное количество незаконных технологических, торговых, экономических и финансовых рестрикций. В первую очередь это касается отраслей с наибольшими эмиссиями парниковых газов, что серьезно ограничивает доступ к необходимым ресурсам и технологиям. Несмотря на односторонние действия, Россия продолжает движение к реализации Парижского соглашения. При этом вынужден отметить, что климатический переговорный процесс переживает кризис. Убеждены, что в сложившейся ситуации Организация Объединенных Наций может сыграть важную роль, уравновешивая интересы разных групп стран. Хочу подчеркнуть, что это возможно сделать только выступая с непредвзятой позицией. Дальнейшее развитие процесса зависит от нахождения баланса при выполнении всего комплекса мер, который может быть полноценно реализован в случае соблюдения ряда условий, включающих обеспечение принципа технологической нейтральности, в том числе от проектов в низкоуглеродной атомной и гидроэнергетике, наличие недискриминационных условий для реализации климатических проектов и безбарьерный доступ к международной верификационной инфраструктуре, а также эффективное развитие международного сотрудничества. Российская Федерация в настоящий момент сталкивается с барьерами и внешнеэкономическими ограничениями, в том числе по доступу к зарубежному оборудованию, технологиям, услугам, рынкам капитала и углеродных единиц, что противоречит духу Парижского соглашения. Надеюсь, что все осознают безальтернативность такого подхода и будут готовы к продуктивной работе на предстоящей 30-й сессии конференции сторон в Вилене. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you, Russian Federation. The next speaker is Her Excellency Batsetseg Batmanka, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia. You have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mongolia is among the climate vulnerable nations. We face intensifying droughts, harsh winters, water scarcity, land degradation, and the erosion of biodiversity. These are not distant warnings, they are lived realities for our herders, our farmers, and our children. But we do not come to this summit with despair. We come with determination and solutions. In 2016, Mongolia ratified the Paris Agreement and pledged to be part of the global solution, and today we reaffirm and elevate that commitment. By 2035, we aim to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by over 30%, and with nature and innovation as our allies, we can push that reduction to more than 50%. Our strategy is bold and comprehensive. We are determined to transform our energy sector with renewables and efficiency, modernize transport, shifting coal from roads to rails, and embracing electric mobility, recycle waste and maximize resource efficiency, and restore our greatest asset to our rangelands. Mongolia's 110 million hectares of rangeland are not just grasslands, they are carbon sinks, biodiversity havens, and cultural treasures. Though over 70% are degraded, more than 80% retain the natural ability to regenerate. This is our opportunity to lead with nature-based solutions. Hence, we are aiming to make the 17th conference of the parties to the UN Convention to Combat Desertification to be hosted in 2026 in Mongolia, more than a conference, but a turning point. One of our flagship initiatives, the Rangeland Flagship Initiative, will unite knowledge, investment, and technology, including AI-powered monitoring, to unlock the full carbon sequestration potential to our landscapes. Let Mongolia be a bridge between tradition and innovation, between region and solutions. Let our nomadic heritage guide the global movement toward regeneration, resilience, and respect for the earth. I thank you.
Thank you, Mongolia. The next speaker is Her Excellency Alicia Basena Ibarra, Ibarra, Minister of the Environment and Natural Resources of the United Mexican States. You have the floor.
Thank you. En nombre de la presidenta Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, México atiende este insoslayable llamado convocado por el secretario general Antonio Guterres junto con Brasil, representado por André Correa del Lago. La presidenta Sheinbaum ha encabezado un cambio estructural a través del Plan México, que consiste en una estrategia de industrialización de largo plazo. Se trata de un plan que intenta aumentar la inversión pública y privada por encima de 28% del PIB, crear 1.5 millones de empleo, incrementar el contenido nacional, sustituir importaciones, promover mayor integración regional y acelerar la transición energética, implementando además una economía circular que reduzca al menos un 50% de los residuos sólidos. Uno de los sectores que más emisiones genera en México es el transporte terrestre, genera alrededor del 25% del total. Por ello, el Plan México propone, por ejemplo, la construcción de 3,000 kilómetros de trenes eléctricos que conectarían al país de sur a norte. Nuestro compromiso en la NDC 2 es disminuir 35% de los gases de efecto invernadero para 2030, lo que implica reducir alrededor de 225 millones de toneladas de carbono aproximadamente. Esto esperamos lograrlo combinando medidas como ya mencionada en los trenes ferroviarios, los trenes eléctricos, así como en la reducción de emisiones a partir de la transición del uso de combustóleo a gas natural en las termoeléctricas del país. Para la NDC 3 estamos en un proceso de consulta interna con todos los sectores industriales de la construcción, el acero, la minería, con energía, nuestra empresa nacional de petróleo, Pemex, de electricidad, CFE, y con el sector agropecuario para que nuestros compromisos sean realistas y factibles para 2035. Pero en principio el compromiso que queremos lograr es reducir alrededor de 175 toneladas de carbono equivalente. Alcanzar este objetivo es imposible sin una sólida estrategia de protección de la biodiversidad y de soluciones basadas en la naturaleza. Tan solo en 2024 nuestro país en los ecosistemas absorbieron 208 millones de toneladas de dióxido de carbono equivalente. En esta materia, nosotros estamos implementando un plan de restauración nacional que incluye la reforestación de 220,000 hectáreas de bosques, selvas y manglares. Necesitamos una taxonomía, como lo mencionó el presidente de Francia, que nos permita contabilizar la absorción de carbono por hectárea de cada tipo de ecosistema. Estimamos, por ejemplo, que los manglares son 4 veces más eficientes en absorber carbono que otros ecosistemas. Nuestro compromiso al 2030 es proteger el 30% de nuestro territorio, tanto marino como terrestre. Contamos ya con 232 áreas naturales protegidas que suman 99 millones de hectáreas. Debemos llegar a 155 millones de hectáreas. Estamos convencidos de que la acción climática es más efectiva cuando se construye desde el territorio y de la mano de las comunidades, de las mujeres y de los pueblos indígenas. Para México y para el sur global, el financiamiento con base en el principio de responsabilidades comunes pero diferenciadas y la adaptación no es opcional, es una urgencia. Sabemos que la crisis climática golpea con más fuerza a quienes menos tienen y por eso nuestros esfuerzos de mitigación y adaptación estamos considerando también el tema de pérdidas y daños en nuestra nueva NDC. Creemos que no puede haber justicia climática sin justicia social, sin igualdad. Reiteramos entonces el irrestricto respaldo de mi país, México, a Brasil y a las Naciones Unidas, esta organización, el multilateralismo y la lucha que encabeza el secretario general contra el cambio climático. Por eso, hagamos de la COP30 un verdadero muchirao, que quiere decir acción colectiva, conjunta, solidaria, y transformemos esta crisis climática en una oportunidad histórica. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mexico. We now invite His Excellency Andreas Eriksen, Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway. Please, you have the floor.
Dear friends, this year marks yet another milestone in our collective response to the urgency of climate change. The Paris Agreement is driving emissions down, and this year's climate targets must be another step towards keeping 1.5 within reach, recognizing that every fraction of a degree matters. I am honored to present Norway's second NDC under the Paris Agreement. Our 1.5 aligned NDC is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 70 to 75% compared to 1990 levels by 2035. The policies to implement our NDC include strong and ambitious measures to support timelines for phasing out the use of fossil fuels towards 2050 in key sectors. This provides strong long-term signals and predictability for our pathway to a low-emission society. Friends, as one of Europe's major energy providers in both oil and gas and renewables, we see the need to phase out emissions from both production and consumption of energy. Our goal is to gradually change our economy, creating jobs and opportunities in low-emission sectors. The success of such strategies will require coordinated approaches between countries producing and consuming energy, like the binding climate agreement between Norway and the EU. While celebrating 10 years of delivery under the Paris Agreement, COP30 must send clear signals to the world that we stand ready together to do more. In Belém, we welcome stronger collaboration between all countries going forward to achieve our common goals of rapidly reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We now have the pleasure to invite His Excellency Mukhtar Babayev, President and the representative of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan for climate issues. Please, you have the floor, Excellency.
Excellencies, dear friends, dear colleagues, as the COP29 presidency, we want to thank all colleagues who have submitted their NDCs. These plans are essential. They help us maintain momentum in the multilateral process. Their targets, timelines and priorities will send strong market signals that give a green light to green investment. And their vision of sustainable development, job creation, clean energy and other social benefits can help us build popular system support for ambitious action. Overall, these reports matter. They should be robust, not rushed. And they should then be delivered, not discarded. But every plan has a price tag. And from earliest days of multilateral negotiations, we have agreed on the need to support each other. In Baku at COP29, we made historic progress on how we would cooperate and enable action. From the Baku finance goal to carbon markets and the fund for responding to loss and damage, countries pledged trillions of dollars for climate action. But a promise made must be a promise kept. There were collective agreements. Collectively, we must be delivered. We will not forget them, and we will not accept going backwards. We will keep asking, where is adaptation finance that was promised by this year? Where is the money for the UN climate funds that was promised by 2030? Dear colleagues, the integrity of international process depends on delivery. The credibility of nations depends on them honoring their words. We need to cut emissions, not aid budgets, because we know that international support will allow for enhanced ambition in our climate plans, and that will benefit everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency. Now we invite to the floor His Excellency Rafael Lucia, Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources of the Philippines. Please, you have the floor.
Excellencies, the Philippines is preparing its third nationally determined contribution looking to 2035. This will not be our first submission, but it will be our strongest yet. We are guided by a sobering global outlook. Even if all unconditional NDCs are met, global emissions will decline by only 3% by 2030 from 2019 levels, far short of the trajectory required to keep 1.5 degrees centigrade within reach. This tells us that the real test is not ambition on paper, but delivery of results. This recognition has shaped our NDC 3.0. Our objective is stronger delivery, not only higher targets. Drawing lessons from our previous NDC, we have designed our enhanced NDC not as a headline figure, but as a costed, economy-wide investment plan. It is anchored in greenhouse gas inventories, climate expenditure tracking, and a national implementation framework. It treats forestry and land use as carbon sinks and as market assets. It employs Article 6 and other mechanisms to mobilize finance and sustainable growth, and it integrates just transition, nature-based solutions, circular economy, gender equality, and social inclusion. Excellencies, what will define progress in the years ahead is not what was pledged, but what was delivered. Therefore, the credibility of NDCs must rest on implementation backed by finance, technology, and capacity building for developing countries. On this basis, the Philippines calls for NDCs to be recognized as credible investment frameworks, costed, transparent, and backed by predictable grant finance for mitigation with adaptation co-benefits, supported by monitoring and accountability that measure both ambition and delivery. Thank you, and we wish all of us success.
Thank you, His Excellency. We now invite His Excellency Honorable Sharif Ali Sharif, Minister for Labor, Economy and Investment, United Republic of Tanzania. Please, Minister, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I bring greetings from the United Republic of Tanzania and from Her Excellency, our beloved President, Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan. Excellencies, the climate crisis is reshaping lives, economies, and geographies. Tanzania has already lost over 90% of the ice cap of Mount Kilimanjaro, while Zanzibar, our beautiful island in Tanzania, with more than 30% of its land below 5 meters above sea levels, faces double threat of sea level rise and saltwater intrusion. Excellencies, Tanzania is acting with ambition. Through our NDC 2.0, we pledge 30 to 35% emissions reduction by 2030, conditional on international support of $19.2 million. However, assessment of the implementation of our NDC 2.0 revealed a $12 billion financing gap, highlighting the urgent need for the international community to honor their obligations under the conventions and the Paris Agreement. We are finalizing NDC 3.0, guided by our new Tanzania Development Vision 2050, which places climate resilience, environmental integrity, and sustainable growth at the center. Excellencies, through the leadership of our President, Samia Suluhu Hassan, Tanzania has launched the National Clean Cooking Strategy 2024-2034, aiming for 80% adoption of clean cooking solution by 2034. We welcome $2 billion pledged globally for clean cooking and call for quick disbursement and scaling up to match the urgent needs of African households, and access to technological development and transfer to accelerate adaptation, mitigation, and innovation. Your Excellencies, for Africa, adaptation and poverty alleviation remain the highest priorities. We are also ready to offer solutions, but to succeed, the international community must urgently fulfill their pledges, not in words, but in grant-based financial support for access, such as clean cooking, energy success, the blue economy, and resilience. In conclusion, Tanzania stands ready with ambition, commitment, and solutions. We are ready to join the international community to act with urgency, fairness, and solidarity for our people and for our planet. Thank you very much. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We now invite His Excellency Adlur Graman Khan, Advisor for Ministry of Industries of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Please, you have the floor.
Co-chairs and Excellencies, Assalamu alaikum. Bangladesh has always stood at the front line of the climate crisis, yet we remain steadfast at our commitment to solutions. In our third NDC, we pledged to reduce 84.97 million tons of CO equivalent emissions by 2035, a 20.3% reduction from business as usual. Despite our limited resources, we cut 26.74 million tons unconditionally, demonstrating our resolve to act, but to deliver the remaining 58.23 million tons. We call upon the global community to honor its pledges of finance, technology, and capacity support. With full implementation of our NDCs, Bangladesh will peak its emissions by 2030 and then begin to decline, a clear sign that climate justice can be advanced when ambition is matched with support. To strengthen the alignment of climate finance with our national priorities, Bangladesh has launched the Bangladesh Climate and Development Partnership, the BCDP. This will coordinate climate finance, ensure climate policy coherence, and enhance cooperation to accelerate the implementation of our adaptation needs and our mitigation targets. Our government is leading this initiative at highest levels, involving multiple ministries as well as having development and financing partners. We look forward to making the BCDP more inclusive by adding private sector and CSOs and more development partners on board. We would like to deliver real benefits for our people. This is not just about funding projects. It is about building trust and building solidarity with our international partners so that together we can deliver climate action that truly makes a difference, especially for our vulnerable populations. We urge the world, especially the developed countries, to match this ambition with fairness and solidarity, to stand with vulnerable nations so that no country is left behind in the fight for our planet's survival, so that together we can build a safer, more just and sustainable future for all. I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We now invite His Excellency David Lammy, Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Thank you for convening us at this critical time when climate change is demonstrably not a distant threat or tomorrow's problem. It is an emergency, one that we must address with urgency. The extreme heat, floods, wildfires, droughts throughout the world, all disrupting lives, livelihoods, and economies everywhere. And let's be honest, the people paying the price the hardest and deepest of prices are those who contributed the least to this crisis, the most vulnerable in the most volatile places. And we must address this. And the United Kingdom is absolutely dedicated to playing its part. At COP29 last November, our Prime Minister announced the UK's commitment, our nationally determined contribution to fighting climate change under the Paris Agreement. It will cut our greenhouse gas emissions by at least 81% by 2035, compared to 1990 levels. It is economy-wide, covering every single sector, aligned with the goal of keeping global warming at 1.5%. National determined contributions matter because they send a signal to our citizens, to investors, and to the world that we are ambitious and determined to deliver on climate change. And let me be clear, ambition is not a drag on growth, as some would suggest. It drives growth. The UK is the first major economy to halve its emissions whilst also growing its economy by almost 80%. Last year, our green economy grew 3 times faster than the economy as a whole. This is the growth story of the coming decade, and ambitious NDCs are the foundation to attracting the investment that makes it possible. But none of us can succeed alone. Multilateralism is the key to achieving our ambitions. Before Paris, we were on track for 4 degrees of warming by the end of this century. Now, if we each deliver our 2030 NDC commitments, we're on track for 2.6 degrees Celsius. If we also all fulfill our net zero commitments, it could be 1.9 degrees Celsius. Progress is real, but it's not enough. Our current pledges must be the floor